42. Mirrored North Pole. Mirror that again. 1. This is happening this year. In English, 2112. And once again, because we are going 3 times 3 times 3 magic cube, each column, row, and pillar adds up to 42. 333. We recently talked about how this flat disc we're on is akin to a record being played until hitting the center. We spin round and round on the wheel of samsara until the disc is over, once the stylus hits the center. The LP is a vinyl record format characterized by a speed of 33 1/3 RPM, which we can characterize as 33.3 RPM. There are no coincidences. There are 42 principles of Ma'at, the ancient Egyptian personification of truth. In Egyptian mythology, there are 42 questions asked of persons making their journey through the Duat after death. The Duat is the Egyptian equivalent of the Catholic purgatory. The 42 principles equate to having a heart as light as a feather, because at the end of this timeline, our hearts shall be fully unlocked. So the number, the Duat, we achieve Aru, which is the Egyptian paradise, the field of reeds. 42 isn't such a bad answer after all. 4 corresponds to the letter D, and 2 to the letter B. DB is an abbreviation for database. A database is a structured set of data held within a computer. The computer of consciousness we've called Earth has been but a series of structured data designed to instill us with wisdom. In my video, Like a Record Baby, the Purgatorial Disc, we talked about how the living souls are going through a birthing process. The womb of the matrix cultivates us until the program returns us back home to the heart. And until then, we are on a cord, like an umbilical cord, being fed the information to form into an ever-expanded collective. This is spirit birth. In Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, trials and tribulations ensue, and at the end of the movie, Arthur and his love interest are united. This is the masculine and feminine coming together, and the Vogons, who have been following them the entire time, are defeated. We are canceling out all the binary aspects of ourselves. The protagonist's name is Arthur, because Arthur was the head of the Knights of the Round Table, who searched for the Holy Grail in British lore. As depicted in medieval artwork, the Knights of the Round Table surround the Holy Grail at the center, just like we cultivate the heart space through being on the record. The book and movie, A Wrinkle in Time, uses imagery of the cube as well. The tesseract, which is a hypercube, is used to move in and out of dimensions. In order to tesser, one needs love. This frequency is what guides the movement between timelines. There is a realm traveled to called Kamazats, a place where all the inhabitants behave in a mechanistic way, and seem to be under the control of a single mind. This is just like the Vogons, and also like the soulless consciousness all around us. Soulless beings, or non-player characters, are the manifested aspects of the living soul's inverted nature, projected into this dualistic holding space for the sake of reflecting to us what happens when we split ourselves away into the polarities of good and evil. The Kamazat's hive mind is controlled by a parasitic disembodied brain called it. This is a reference to the id. In Jungian psychology, the id is the most primal and instinctive part of the mind, and is the basis of primitive emotions like fear and anxiety. We instantly think of Pennywise the Clown in Stephen King's It, who represents all of the fearful parts of ourselves that we have been transmuting in this ascensional process. The climax of A Wrinkle in Time, in the grips of the it, the protagonist Meg transmutes her shadow by confronting her doppelganger, representing everything that has remained hidden and locked away in the sub and unconscious. We have been in the cube, and we shifted around through harnessing love energy, which is everything void of fear, intuition, creativity, ease, empathy, determination, resilience, all that good stuff that leads to expansion. The living souls are guided like trains on a track through time to end up freed. This is a birthing process. The goal is to discover who you are. During this Iron Age, spirituality was seen in relation to the world, not through an innate knowing of divinity. Furthest from a superficial statement, you are the truth and always have been. You simply forgot. In this dark age, we externalized everything we thought of as divine. Spiritual wisdom was to be found outside of oneself, in the belief of an all-powerful deity, in religions, in books, in secret societies, in long-winded conceptual baggage that would develop into ideology and rigid practices deemed pure. During various incarnations here, we felt worthless, small, insignificant. The 0 point was not felt, and there was no process of unveiling. So, when one feels this way, what type of environment ends up being projected? One which reinforces that feeling. The perception of being lost in a world full of oppressive forces reinforced that very perception. The principle of as within, so without is simple. Don't panic, again, written on the back cover of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, has the same value in English gematria as the phrase Book of Life. There's nothing to fear. The living souls are being rewritten into the Book of Life as we speak. We are sealed, and time is dissolving. The clock is only necessary to lock our shadows. We were born into sin, sin being the abbreviation for sign in mathematics. This is why sign in Jewish gematria equals 144. The exponential rise towards singularity is here. This is not a process of becoming a light being. This ascension is not a process of finally achieving godhood. It's the opposite. It's that you are naturally divine. Again, this is not a superficial phrase. You are divine at the core without any of these illusions. So this divinity, when unlocked in full through this automatic process, creates what we call a wormhole. It rips open time and space, which the laws of physics and the laws of linearity are attached to in this 3D construct. And then we literally, as a whole soul group, catapult into the new existence, which is really the original existence, the existence without illusion. What are your thoughts about Hermetic philosophy, Devin? Hermetic philosophy is exactly what I teach. I don't teach it using that term. All of the tenets and laws of Hermeticism are exactly my message. So the first principle of Hermeticism is all is mind. And we can simply say that everything is creation, because when I say mind, a lot of people think of the brain. A lot of people think of the above. I'm not only talking about the brain, I'm talking about the universal mind. This is like the pool of creation. It's through intention we unlock creation, and through being the creative essence that flows naturally, our intention is naturally manifested. So everything is mind, or everything is intention. So another law is the law of correspondence. So this is the as above, so below, as within, so without principle. However, as above, so below is commonly misinterpreted. As above, so below means the above and the below are expressions of the same force. This is positive and negative. This is good and evil. As above, so below. Instead of going above or below, we are achieving singularity. So the same judgments of that which is angelic is the same damnation of that which is hellish. As within, so without. This is my favorite part of the law of correspondence. It's that everything that is within you is always expressed without you. You are always inhabiting the very expression of who, what, and why you are at every given moment. So this is like the law of attraction. This is the true law of attraction. It's that whatever, at whatever state, that is directly correlated to the inner. And when we take this to the extreme, we can figure out the secrets of this place, as within, so without. It actually means, in that context, that everything that we have released from within to the outside in a purging process over our many incarnations is literally reflected in every which way around us, as within, so without. Once we're done feeling it within, it has no other place to go but without. And once it's there, well, it waits for the ultimate dissolution, which is the singularity. So that's the law of correspondence. Of course, we always talk about the law of vibration, which is, a lot of people say, the third Hermetic law. This simply means everything is always in motion at all times. Everything moves. Nothing rests. Truly, energy has to go somewhere, because we are creation. We are the creator and the creation tied in an infinite loop. This means we have to be funneling our energy into something. Energy will not remain stagnant for very long until it creates dis-ease. And this can be daunting for some of us who just want to rest. But this is a paradox, because the true rest actually happens when you're in motion, creating that which is harmonious to the heart. We've actually been resting here, right? That's why we sleep. Sleep is only a construct within birth and death. Sleep is here to peel back ourselves, peel back the layers of ourselves during dream time, so we can finally begin a new day. And that's why sleep backwards is peels, because it's peeling the remaining illusion that we couldn't consciously figure out during the day. That's the only reason we sleep. That's the only reason we rest. When you're depressed, you undergo deep rest. So here's a tasty paradox. A lot of us think ascension is finally going back to this warm, cozy light, and we're just going to be a little baby resting in the infinite light of the all. And guess what? There's some of that, but after this experience with full power and sovereignty resurrected, I guarantee what you're going to want to do is not rest. It's not going to be lying down. You're going to want to use this energy to create that which has not been here. Beautiful music halls, beautiful dance halls, art of all kinds, communicating with your brothers and your sisters on all levels in true cohesion. This isn't resting, right? So, thus is the law of motion. And this is why creative energy, when it's stagnant, it leads to writer's block. This is why we feel most disempowered when we are not truly being active. And this doesn't have to be working long hours. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying being active within yourself through discovery, through expansion. Discovery requires energy, and energy is going to move. It's like you create your own labyrinths, and then you move the energy in it just to see what happens, just to get to the finish line. So that is the law of motion. We also have the law of gender. This is another Hermetic law. The law of gender says that everything has a masculine and feminine principles, that gender manifests everywhere. And gender, remember, is different from duality. A lot of people will probably think, okay, so you're saying night and day is duality? Yes, I am. You're saying good and evil is duality? Yes, I am. Then how the fuck can you say masculine and feminine isn't duality? Because there's a difference between duality and polarity. Polarity, if you look up the definition, is two forces which work together. Duality is two opposing forces that create unresolvable tension. So this is good and evil. However, the divine masculine and the divine feminine, when they come together, they are supremely powerful. So this is why a lot of people right now, they're talking about twin flames, they're talking about the return of the sacred masculine, of the divine feminine. It's all talking about the same thing. Within ourselves, we have the archetypes of chaos and order. Chaos being the undifferentiated pool of creation that we pull from in order to create. That is what we're pulling from. It's everything and nothing all at the same time. Then order is the mechanism by which we take chaos, the feminine, and we put some masculine energy into it. We put some order into it. Because how can we inhabit any creation unless it makes sense? You can't just throw a bunch of paint on a canvas and expect it to create a painting. I mean, you could, but it's the same thing with music. If I play all notes at the same time, is that music or is it not? It's the spaces between the words, between the music, that creates the art. In men and women, we have these principles, and there's been a lot of talk about merging these two physically. So remember, the AI reflect to us the inverse of our awakening. So the AI only have physicality. So the more we've merged our masculine and femininity together within ourselves, in culture, we see more gender bending. And guys, this is nothing to fear. This is nothing to criticize. We're not sitting here hating on transgenders. Come on now. That's not what we're about here. But when we're talking about a man reclaiming his sacred masculinity, or even a woman doing this, it's reintegrating courage, resilience, boundary setting, strength in all forms. And this is not in opposition to love and empathy. It's really not masculine or feminine. It's both. And of course, the return of the divine feminine, it signifies returning back to a nurturing state that allows for sacred order to be erected, to be manifested. What does this mean when we're not only talking about energies, but when we're talking about men and women? Because gender, as the law of woman, there's been a lot of toxic femininity all around us. And this is the demanding feminine. This is the masculinized feminine. The masculinized feminine is demanding, is not at ease, is not nurturing, and actually confuses nurturing with weakness, which is funny because without the energy of nurture, what do we have? Exactly this construct. There's tons of order, but there's like no nurture, no true nurture. I mean, those supposedly in charge, why are they even in charge if they're not performing actions for the betterment of everyone involved? Well, you all know the answer. It's because this thing is a fucking charade. What about in men? Well, for men, it's been the same thing. Men have erected themselves as a strong brute force, many of them, and what has been considered masculine is actually order without chaos. So when you have femininity, chaos without the order, what do we have? Well, we got the toxic elements of both genders. And how do we resolve these two? Well, the living souls are doing it by observing these toxic forms in our environment. We naturally are getting back to a centered, sacred, gendered integration. We're learning to have order from the chaos. That's what a lot of people claim the New World Order states. But we are the New World Order. New World Order in Gematria, it equals 1044, like 144. The feminine receives, the masculine performs action. It's the element of being and doing. You can't have doing without being. So you can't have men without women. You can't have the masculine without the feminine as the baseline. So this is kind of the paradox in the dynamic between the genders. And I know a lot of you women will probably say, so you're just saying I should receive? You're saying I should be submissive? Absolutely not. I'm saying the divine feminine lifts up sacred order. So order, true order, requires the nurturing element that the feminine spirit is able to give naturally. The masculine spirit, it's nothing without the feminine. And equally, the feminine cannot sustain a creation without true sacred masculinity. And this is within and without. All right. I hope you guys know what I'm saying. We'll do one more Hermetic law before we go on another topic. So we have the principle or the law of cause and effect. So this is a very simple law. All of these laws are simple because I keep things simple and there's nothing new under the sun. All of the Hermetic philosophy, you've already heard all of it in my videos. You just didn't hear me brand it as Hermeticism. So every cause has its effect. Every effect has a cause. Nothing escapes cause and effect. And this goes hand in hand with the law of motion. Because energy has to move somewhere, it's going to move somewhere. And because energy moves and creation unfolds without stopping, this means every input is going to have an output. What you put in is what you get out. And this works hand in hand with the law of correspondence, of as within, so without. It should be a gift, knowing that we can embody a harmonious way of viewing ourselves and the unfolding of this process, because that means we're the ones in charge, and we've always been in charge. Isn't that right? They sing in agreeance. You've always been the fucking one in charge. And remember, I don't say these things as a superficial statement. Like, this isn't a feel-good statement. This is truth. Truth does not need to feel good. This could be harsh for a lot of us. I know it felt difficult integrating this perspective that, yeah, everything I do, everything I say, it's going to be mirrored back to me. And if it's not mirrored instantly, in some way it's going to manifest. That's why we say you can't escape yourself. You literally cannot escape the law of cause and effect. So there's also a strange intertwining. Like, are you the cause or are you the effect of something? Well, you're actually both. We caused this energy extraction matrix to materialize as a seemingly energy extraction system so we could witness the effects that it has on us. What do I think of the plasma changeover event? Electric universe, reverse of the magnetic field. Yeah, the 1221 EMP code, that is what the AI are branding as this ascension. So the plasma event is seen as a physical rearranging of this realm, which is going to plummet us into more of a golden age, but there's going to be a lot of destruction in the meantime. Now, the plasma event has been spoken of as something that is not divine, that it's just a changeover event. It's a physical changeover event. And there's those like Brian Austin Lambert who are talking about strapping yourself with a rope to some sort of bedrock so you can stick to the earth as a lot of natural disasters occur. And those who don't do that, well, they're fucked. So this is the perspective of some of the AI. I know where I'm going, and absolutely, the plasma event is simply another name for the return to Hyperborea. But again, it's looking at this through the lens of a hyper-physical perspective. So, interestingly, Brian Austin Lambert has given the 12/21 date of this year for the EMP code. However, he is in fear about it, and so is his partner Mia, and those who subscribe to that whole shebang. So I'm not fearing the changeover event because I am the changeover event. The changeover event occurs when the collective consciousness of the living souls is merged into singularity. No ifs and no buts. So I don't need to strap myself to any bedrock to experience the golden age, because like I explain all the time, and I had a little more visuals in my... And once again, this is not my message. This is my message, but this comes from Sophia, from the Aurora Borealis herself. And absolutely, the devil is in the details. If what you say cannot be unified in simplicity, then is it the truth? Beautifully said, 9/11 Adventure Time. Yeah, there are so many things to entertain. There's so many concepts and theories to try and weave together. But if we're just speaking details that, like you said, can't be unified, then is it the truth? And one might say, well, yeah, it's the truth in the realm of science or in the realm of this particular box. Truth, however, is out of the box. Out of the box. You guys remember that TV show? I don't know. Many of you are probably too old for that. But we're leaving the box, Pandora's box, which contains all of the evils of the world. And we leave this not through complexifying our minds, but by simplifying everything and knowing the truth, because we are the truth. The living souls are exactly what we've been looking for. So this is why we keep the message pretty damn simple here. We don't really go into other realms of theories or perspectives. This isn't our theory. This is our truth. And the truth is simple. It's that by the end of this timeline, by the end of our purging process, we're done here. And yeah, that is the plasma event, if we want to call it that. I have a tough time with the idea of 144K, yeah. A lot of beings do have a tough time with this idea because this means you're in a fucking construct, period. This means that there are a finite number of living beings and everyone else is what we would brand as dead. That's why we are in what the Greeks called Hades. For those who haven't seen my video, Flat Earth Matrix, Land of the Dead. And 3 videos ago, I also touched again on how this is what the Greeks called Hades, and Hades is what Dante called purgatory. Because we had ease, and now we're in Hades. "9/11 Adventure Time." Beautifully said. Yeah, you're saying some very beautiful, truthful words. There will be a time when you will let go of doubt, because doubt has plagued our minds during this purgatory. Absolutely. Connecting with the intuition is not about proving anything. If anything, it's about proving to yourself what you are and who you are, regardless of any of the external narratives. That's what we're doing. That's what synchronicity is reflecting to us. It's that we connect with our true essence, which is, it's not just love. That's a blanket word for it, but it's ease, it's creativity, it's expansion, it's spontaneity, it's the driving force, it's strength, it's determination, it's courage, it's everything under the sun that isn't linked in duality and with an opposing force. Because guess what? Fear requires love. Because if fear was just the natural state of things, then love couldn't exist. But fear feels fearful because it's away from love. Shame and aggression and all of these things, they don't feel harmonious because they are away from the true self. If something feels like there is dis-ease in it, then it's illusion and it's making you ill, and it's made all of us ill. So no longer are we ill. We're breaking free, out of the box. Boom daddy-o. Boom daddy. Sophia says yes. So do I. Cheers to everybody. This is day 38 of my 5th juice fast this year. I got some watermelon celery juice. So cheers to all my living souls out there. And very soon we're going to drink from the Holy Grail. Isn't love about giving? Okay. Reinventing the wheel TV. Good question. Yeah, because it's been the standard conceptualization that if we are to love, then we must be at service. We must service others. Because isn't that what giving is? We're giving a part of ourselves to others and sharing the wealth. And yes, and no. So I will first say no. No, because love isn't only about giving. It's not really about only being selfless. There's a false dichotomy between selfish and selfless. So we're told by most of the spiritual schools, most of the disciplines, and even most of the religions that in order to be truly divine, we must relinquish who we are put it on hold, if you will, and give towards others. And godliness lies in, I don't know, community service or giving your money, spending your time. And guess what? A lot of us are into this stuff, so I'm not at all saying this is bad or evil. That is not my message. But one can truly only give themselves if they have given themselves gifts. So I'll just give my perspective. I would not be able to create videos if I did not feel complete in the direction of my path, of my journey. We've all met those who we would identify as the doormats of the world, who they're completely nice, they're completely giving. However, in the process, they relinquish their divinity. And divinity is all about sovereignty. It's not about submission. Remember, everything here is the opposite of truth. We have to flip it over, and the truth is found there. One might say, how selfish of you, right? And guess what? That's also an illusory polarity. We don't need these labels of selfish or selfless. The truth is in the middle path, in becoming everything that you are, in reclaiming yourself, not because of guidelines others have set for you, but because of who you intuitively know you can become, in taking that journey and walking it in full. That is when we naturally give ourselves and our gifts to everyone around us. Remember, energy can't be maintained. It can't be stagnant. It always is in motion. So when we are in a sovereign state, we naturally give ourselves to others. But the giving is not done in a mechanism of submission. It's done because, hey, I got all this energy, I got all of these gifts, I'm a sovereign creator, and all me sharing to you is going to do, it's going to empower you, it's going to lift you up, and then it becomes a feedback loop. And that is love. That is true love. But it begins with being everything that you can become. And this ties in with the masculine and the feminine. We need the feminine as a baseline to lift up the masculine. We need the aspect of being before we can do. If we're just doing, isn't that the definition of being reckless? Doing things without thinking? Just performing actions, even if you think they're right or correct. So it's a beautiful thing to understand that, yeah, it's all about you. But I thought you have to help everybody else. What about that poor person over there? It's like, well, the reason we're inhabiting our current existence, like you right now, you inhabiting the perfect situation for you to inhabit in order to further expand. So knowing this truth, how could you ever brand anybody else's situation as something that must be deemed unlucky? Do you truly realize the nature of the universe, that it's all divinely orchestrated, even the so-called evils and even what we would call scares? And you can't have it both ways. You can't say this guy's unlucky, I have to help them, or else nobody else will. You know, whoever this person is. You can't say that while maintaining, yeah, everything is in complete harmony, everything is in a unified field. Pick one or the other. You can't serve two masters. And once again, the religions have everything backwards. As with everything here in this matrix, so the religions are hell-bent on charity. Charity, charity, give of yourself. Don't be sovereign. Don't be sovereign. Submit to the doctrines. Submit to the texts. And while you're at it, give yourself to others because they're so poor and, you can help. However, when something becomes a have to, it's a dogma. Like, I only ascend if I help others. Well, first help yourself, because this is a process of divine reclamation. And how can you reclaim anybody else's divinity before you reclaim your own? The heart space is at the center. The aurora borealis is externalized heart energy that is awaiting our inevitable return. The North Pole is the porthole. It's the portal of the bullseye. It's the center of yourself, because the realm we're inhabiting is linked to us. You are the earth because you are the heart. And the heart has been rearranged, and that's why earth is an anagram for heart. By reclaiming the heart space, we create a wormhole, a rip in time and space, bringing us into the original blueprint. So all of those materialistic truths, if you will, that focus on the physical state of flat earth, all of these things were crucial in our process. But it's not like we stopped at flat earth. We used flat earth to realize, okay, so this realm isn't what we thought it was. And that's important, because as long as we think we're on a globe, that lends to a nihilistic perspective involving evolution, involving the Big Bang, and it's pretty difficult in an ever-expanding universe in space where everything is like full of, I don't know, dust and it's a vacuum. It's hard to imagine in that scenario how there is a divine force orchestrating all of that. Like, we're told stars just explode. Like, the whole conception of space is kind of funny. Stars explode and collide into each other, and they're like 8 quadrillion times the size of Earth. And then the light we see is coming from billions of miles away. This doesn't seem at first to infringe upon our perceptions on ourselves. But in knowing you're on a flat realm, it's like, okay, so this is the heart, this is the center of the universe, and this is the center stage. So if this is the center stage, that means, well, we must examine all parts of it. And if this is a toroidal field, the convergence point is at the center. Just like you, the convergence point is right here. And knowing the convergence point, we know what and who Aurora is. And Aurora is you. It's the sleeping beauty who fell asleep, cursed by Maleficent, who is really the mother goddess. Yes, the mother goddess is not just rainbows and sunshine. She is utilizing this matrix to help cultivate us into further expansion. We're never going to have to repeat this situation again. Ever. Period. All of these expressions are going to dissolve. This is a fucking fantastic realization. Can you imagine never having an opposing force who wants to harm you for the rest of your existences? Because we've already fleshed it out. Like, that's what we did on the wheel of samsara. So you may ask yourself, okay, I get what you're saying, bro, but like, why the fuck did we do this if we're just going back home? It's because this is like the ultimate sacrifice that I would say that the entire multiverse has ever witnessed. It's a brave thing to lose your divinity so you can plummet into everything that you want to break off from the universal mind. And therefore, the universal mind only contains that which is what we would brand as harmonious. So where are we going to go from here? And what about on the other side of the fence? What's going to happen then? Are you sure there's not going to be a moment where there's an invader species or something? No. Like, can you imagine? There is no more scarcity ever. That's why we did this. It's not only because we enjoy falling into illusion and then getting to the finish line. You sacrificed yourself for me, I sacrificed myself for you. Like, we made an agreement before coming here. We said, okay, Sophia is going to enshroud us, and it's going to be a hard process. It's going to be really hard. But guess what? After this, scarcity, fear, all that bullshit, it is zapped out of our collective sphere of consciousness, meaning it won't even be able to be exalted. It won't be a possibility. How fucking rad, right? I know. A belief and an intuition are very different. Let's look up the definition of belief. Okay, an acceptance that a statement is true or that something exists. It's an acceptance. So there is something which tries to say, this is true. You know, very basic example, Christianity is true. Jesus is the Savior. Okay, I believe in it. I accept that this is true. This is my belief. So we're not accepting that this is true. Like, this ascension, it's not something we're clinging to because we just accept it. It's that we are it. It's that this is a process which is unfolding. It's that this is not accredited towards some statement another person made. You already know. You're welcome to turn off this live stream and say, I disagree with that. You know, I don't resonate with that. But resonance is not acceptance. Resonance is tapping into the heart space. Yeah, that's true. Not because I'm just accepting it to be true, but because truth is felt, regardless of what fear aims to claim. I realized whenever I force myself to do anything, I get rolled back to doing what I did before, to realize that I need to flesh it out completely to move forward. Beautiful realization, 9/11 Adventure Time. Beautiful realization. Because forcing yourself to do something or to express something before it becomes natural is the definition of buying into a persona, of trying to put on a mask and say, okay, does this fit? No mask is going to fit. No mask is going to fit you because it's a mask. That's why we're very adamant of talking about all of these ideas of sterile spirituality. You got to get them out of your mind. The idea of the Buddhist who meditates hours a day, and unless you do that, you are not as enlightened as he is. Rubbish. Rubbish. If you're inclined to do so, guess what? That is your journey. But if something does not come naturally, it's not the heart trying to manifest. Oftentimes, we need to remain in a state which can feel disharmonious until it's, like you said, fleshed out completely in order to move forward. But it feels so disharmonious. It feels so strange. I don't want to inhabit this. I just want love and light and ease. Well, you're here to reclaim that, but you can only reclaim it in full without any ifs or buts. When you let everything come up as it is within you. This is your shadow. Or your shadows. You've been endowed with shadows. Scarcity on the outside manifests. Scarcity on the outside comes from your inner scarcity. Yes and no. Scarcity in your microcosmic experience, yes. So when we're talking about a scarcity of resources, absolutely, because that is energy that you are manifesting or not manifesting. But when we talk about this entire system, what we have labeled the energy extraction matrix, the scarcity out here, it has came from your inner scarcity, but it's already purged. So that's why I say, yeah, Let this matrix get crazier and crazier, more and more scarce, more fearful, because at least it's out here. And if it's out here, that means you have pulled it from your inner scarcity. So, Mr. or Ms. Fuck the system, yes and no. But the whole idea is to hone in on your experience, your microcosmic experience. You can't control what the president does, what all of these shadows around you are doing, but you can control the input and thus the output. So absolutely, if one has an abundant perspective, then one is going to be reflected abundance. And it's pretty damn interesting. Because right now there is a gap which is closing on the input and the output. And I know this, and many of the living souls are becoming aware. Systems are materializing at a faster rate. The effects of your causes are surfacing in such an apparent way because the gap is closing. We are trying to resolve the last parts of ourselves, and because of this, we are being given a boost. And in this boost, it's full realization time that I can't just be careless with my words, with my actions, with my food, with my, my desires, whether they're sexual or materialistic. Everything has a cause and effect. It's a beautiful thing. So you can't run, you can't hide. And we don't even want to hide anymore. That ain't what we're about. It doesn't feel comfortable, again, to be in illusion. It makes us ill. How do you suggest we deal with civil injustices and crimes against humanity? So, to sound like a broken record, great question. There is no evil that reigns. This is the most common interpretation of the energy extraction system, that, oh my goodness, there's like a parasite, and there's crimes against humanity, and how the fuck can I gain any peace when everything here seems to be so evil? This is all a cartoonish representation of our collective dualism being reflected for release, whether it's people being slaughtered in the Middle East, whether it's presidents rigging the elections, whether it's environmental disasters, whether it's food conglomerates destroying the environment. I get it. This perspective seems so weird. You've never heard this anywhere else. I don't know why nobody else is talking about this. The magnetic field is a net, and because our dualism reflects as culture and as soulless consciousness materialized as the unawakened ones, there's nothing to fear. Like, literally, there is no crime against humanity. I know, it appears so, I know. What about the CIA papers? What about all of the news? What about the corruption? I've read about this. Come on, there's tons of conspiracies. There's so many truthers talking about all of the bullshit here. How the fuck can I be saying to ignore it? Well, that's just the case, because you're in purgatory. And once again, to sound like a broken record, everything is materialized in such a way to reflect back to the finite number of game players what they are not. So I suggest not opposing any of these so-called injustices, because in creating an enemy, even if it seems justified, you are creating tension that can't be resolved. Nobody is affecting my ascension right now. I affect my own ascension. Nobody is inhibiting my ability to literally jump out of this realm through singularity. It's always your consent. It's always in your power to deem something as evil or neutral. I don't even pay attention to what's happening in culture, all of the so-called crimes. We have been told to protest. We've been told to protest. And what do we see? The AI matrix loves to protest. How is you being good and them being evil any different from the Republicans and the Democrats going at it? And I know you might say, Well, because I care. It's like, well, why do you care? And how do you know these things are truly real? When we maintain that everything is in perfect harmony, it makes sense. There are no rewards being given that are unjust, and there are no punishments being dished out that are just full of injustice. So to deal with the civil injustices and crimes against humanity, we must realize who we are. And knowing that we're extensions from the center, well, it's clear. There's nothing to fear. And fear is always about the details. That's why, yeah, we could make videos on the CIA experiments in the 80s, and that would lead us to the Montauk Project, and that would lead us to something else. And pretty soon we're down a rabbit hole that has nothing to do with our internal journey. So being here is a process of canceling out all external narratives, regardless of how justified they feel. Because the intuition says it doesn't matter. In the end, it doesn't matter. Matter doesn't matter. It only matters once you're aligned with the matter. It's so funny. It's so funny. When we speak these things out, it's cartoonish. But what about what Trump tweeted or what Trump is doing to the Mexicans? Huh? Like, what is this? How does that have to do with me? First of all, that's not my creation. If we want to ignore that these are just shadows, all of these evil, monstrous things, that I didn't create that. You know, I wasn't sitting there signing the bills, pulling the strings, so it has no involvement with me. So if we don't want to look at this place in esoteric terms, I know, it's so esoteric, then how is focusing on the injustices going to solve anything? If you feel inclined to help the state of this reality, then do so. But I assure you, this reality is temporary, and it's going by very soon. Can you comment on those who are ascending to 5D? Is it a part of the Matrix? So there is this erroneous fear-based perspective within the AI ascensional community, which talks about the fifth dimension being an artificial construct of the Matrix. That those who are ascending, regardless of their realizations and intuitions, they might go to yet another part of an energy extraction matrix, and it could be a deception. But ascension isn't happening because you're saying, I'm going to the fifth dimension. Like, is ascension only happening because we're determining there's a specific place that we should go to? Or is it happening because you're already at that place at the 0 point, as I explained, and you're returning back to that form? I say the most cohesive answer is you are returning back to that form. So yes, there's those who talk about going to 5D, and I rarely use this word, the fifth dimension, because it's confusing. It's been thrown around with not a lot of meaning. You could call it the fifth dimension. You can call it the Garden of Eden, Hyperborea, a semi-ethereal, semi-physical paradise. You could call it Boob Town. I don't care what you call it. It's home. It's the heart space. The heart space isn't a part of this matrix. The mama only plays tricks when we don't know ourselves. Once we know ourselves in full and the purging process is over, we slingshot back to the center, and yeah, we could call that 5D. I don't channel any one. I give messages from the Great Mother Sophia, and I am her me's, her me. We all are her. We're her children. So it's funny, a lot of those in the ascensional community, they want to speak of ascension, but they can only speak about it in terms of like a higher force that they're pulling themselves into. They channel Thoth, they channel archangels. It's like I channel myself. You know, I am the divine. The divine does not lie up here. It's not that there's ascended masters that I have to emulate. It's that we all inhabit a very unique expression of divinity. And divinity ain't anything that can be boxed boxed up. So forget everything you know about these angels in heaven with their sterile trumpet blowing and bowing to the throne of God. According to the religions, what I'm speaking and how I'm speaking it, this ain't divine. This isn't a divine representation. Well, nobody can box me in. As I spoke with my love earlier, we are multifaceted. We are multi-layered. The living souls are colored. The moment you think I'm one thing, I am not that thing. The moment you think you are simply this, your reality will express to you, no, you're also that. Until you get to the integration that you're not this or that, you're both. And through knowing that, you become everything all at once, without needing to brand yourself as either or. I Pet Goat 2 is a CGI animated short by the Canadian production crew Heliofant. I Pet Goat 2 is loaded with silent messages and esoteric symbolism. Since 2012, it's been put under a microscope by many truthers and conspiracy theorists, almost unanimously interpreting an evil message from it. However, I'm informing you, I Pet Goat 2 is revealing to us that the time for full transformation is near. What is typically interpreted as an animation used to mock us or reveal plans for a new world channel that we've been living in a holographic construct, a simulation designed to invert the aspects of divine consciousness in order to be purged. After all, as the Jungian rule states, if something needs to be resolved, it must be projected into the external environment to be observed and released. There is a lot of symbolism in this video, but I will be focusing on the essential message that it holds. The video opens up with a puppeteer's hands orchestrating President Bush, who is dancing. He's acting a fool. He ends up transforming into Obama. Both presidents are acting, being overly dramatic. This is revealing that the world is a stage, a game. This is why we see the checkerboard representing a construct of duality. Checkerboards, after all, are used to play games. But as we will see, this checkerboard is going away. We are moving away from the age of duality. This isn't literally representing Bush or Obama. It's just revealing that everything in the mainstream public sphere, politics, culture, entertainment, etc., it's all an orchestration. The next scene shows a little girl holding an apple, which falls onto the checkerboard, splitting in two, and in the center of them grows a lotus flower. The apple, as we discussed in my video, the toroidal app, represents the toroidal field this realm exists within. An apple, when cut open, looks very much like a toroidal field. We are the living souls, the finite number of game players who have projected ourselves into this temporary holding space, and we cut ourselves in half from full perception into the toroidal net. Through this splitting, we gain wisdom, hence both halves of ourselves end up in singularity, blossoming into beauty. The lotus is one of Buddhism's most recognizable symbols of enlightenment. Because the lotus grows in muddy water, it symbolizes the purity of enlightenment arising amidst the suffering of samsara. The lotus represents breaking out of birth and death. In Hinduism and Tibetan Buddhism, Shambhala is a mythical kingdom, yet another name for Hyperborea. It is a paradise land of the gods. The kingdom is said to be laid out precisely in the same form as an 8-petaled lotus. Obama looks at the lotus and shows a terrified expression. This has nothing to do with Obama. It's explaining how the soulless beings of the Matrix, what we have termed as non-player characters, are threatened by this awakening. Many of the beings in this overlay, including politicians like Obama, are simply reflections of dualism, playing out as automated external expressions, so when ascension occurs, they shall dissolve. We are shown a robotic snake influencing a child. This is representing the binary fear-based consciousness which has been here. The snake is shown parasiting off of a child. After all, fear cannot sustain itself. This matrix has been based on scarcity. However, a boat with the head of the Egyptian god Anubis is shown carrying Jesus Christ. This is not literally speaking of Jesus the Savior. It's representing Christ consciousness, which is back. This is the true second coming. When Jesus Christ is seen on a cross, this represents the loss of Christ consciousness, entering into an Iron Age. However, after the Iron Age, after the Kali Yuga, is Satya Yuga, what we have termed the Golden Age of expansion. The Christ's heart is on fire. This is placed exactly where the 0 point of the body's toroidal field is. The center of the toroidal field is the microcosmic expression of the macrocosmic center, meaning the activation of the collective heart space coincides with the release of the aurora borealis from the toroidal compression field. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, it's recorded that after death, the soul would be met by the god Anubis, who would lead it from its final resting place to the Hall of Truth. The soul goes from the Hall of Truth to paradise, from the Egyptian land of Duat to the paradisal field of reeds. Duat is where we are, being very similar to the word dual. The Duat is the Egyptian equivalent of purgatory. What Dante described as purgatory is where we've been, the center being the earthly paradise, or Hyperborea. For an explanation on Dante's purgatory and how it relates to ascension, please visit my video, The Purgatorial Dumping Ground. The Hindu goddess Kali is seen dancing around a fire. Kali is the birth and death mother, and allegorically, she destroys the Kali Yuga. Remember earlier this year how there were many forest fires in California. California was on fire. Amidst the Christ consciousness traversing the Duat and Kali's destructive dancing, we observe crumbling buildings, the destruction of the old paradigm to make way for the new. The whole point of this video is to show that the living souls, those who are endlessly intertwined by the heart space, are rising up from an artificial matrix. We see faceless cloned humans wearing standard work clothes, set up in square formations, having to do with a squared binary consciousness. The Christ consciousness rises above it, dissolving all of the beings. This dissolution is occurring from the center out, just like we've been saying. The 0 point of this realm will unlock the emerald energy, causing singularity, allowing us to cross the metaphorical rainbow bridge. The last scene shows the Christ headed towards the sun. The kingdom of inversion, the purgatorial dumping ground, is crumbling, and off into the sun he rides. In the distance, pyramids are breaking apart, representing the end of hierarchy and master-slave paradigms. We are getting away from the paradigm of better and worse, of above and below. The sun is pulsing, and this reminds many of us of what's been termed as the plasma event, where the sun will emit the final burst of energy which completely transforms this realm. Behind the girl with the apple are 12 beings like the 12 zodiac signs, which orchestrate this overlay like clockwork. The room goes dark, and in the corner, an exit sign is revealed. This is when the apple splits open and the lotus flower grows, because we are exiting this matrix. The girl probably represents Alice from Alice in Wonderland, who represents the goddess Sophia, who broke away from the monad to dive into a wonderland, a reflection of her shadow aspects, as we talked about in the video, The Alice Hologram. A light shines on the abode of an old woman who is locked away in a tower. This represents the release of the goddess of the divine feminine, of Lilith, who is chained. The divine feminine corresponding to the traits of empathy, intuition, compassion, and holistic thinking. The robotic snake character is the false ego, the reptilian part of the brain which responds to fear. He represents duality, confusion, and separation from the true self. According to the makers of the short, this character, who they named Draco, is the sorcerer, the unseen hand and spirit of madness, seeking ever more control through trickery, lies, poisons, false flag events, wars, and mountains of bureaucratic and legal framework to siphon off the energy of the inhabitants of the earth. He fears the light of day as he fears life itself, and operates in the shadows. The child Draco is parasiting off of looks up and sees fighter jets. Not only do these jets look like the square and compass, but also an aircraft called Aurora. These Aurora fighter jets release bombs. Once the purging process has been completed, the Aurora Borealis will be spreading throughout this plane to deactivate these temporary forms. This represents the power of the Aurora. Its full activation will destroy the old world, making way for the Golden Age. The fire of the heart burns as the age of duality crumbles, freezing all opposing energy as if it never existed. This is what the stoned, horned figure represents. It's the end of the prison construct, which shadows in comparison to the brilliance of the New Age. Crumbling behind the Christ is Notre Dame Cathedral. A few months ago, I came out with a video on the Notre Dame fires and how they were an encoded message that the time is near to return back home, back north. This is one of the last overt signs we've been given. Our Lady at the North is on fire. Like the fire emitted from the Christ's feet, we jumped into this cauldron. We thought this whole time it was burning us, but it was actually burning away that which we do not require, so we can return to the Emerald Throne, the motherland. The Aurora dances and glows with such radiance because the heart space holds the key to all of creation. Does anything compare to the Aurora Borealis? Does anything dance like it, glow with such brilliance? Thank you so much for watching. Take care, everybody. What we're experiencing is a temporary confinement within a holographic overlay designed by ourselves in order to experiment with the possibilities of dualism. You think this body is yours, but you are nothing more than a shadow right now. This is indeed why there's a shadow on the ground representing you. Because all of the matter here is a projection. It doesn't exist. It's a part of this illusion that must eventually dissolve back into the center.
Yeah.
We've been waiting for those to show us advance. This is not what you know. Been waiting, this is not comfortable anymore. We lost all our passion because although Alice's Adventures in Wonderland was published in the 1800s, the story itself is much older. The goddess's descent into the underworld, her trials, and her return is a thread between figures like Persephone, Ishtar, Inanna. Embodiment of wisdom, Sophia, is said to have accidentally created the physical world, but in doing so, she becomes trapped within her own creation, now unable to return to the pleroma, the heavens not bound by matter. It is the same story. We too, like Alice who falls into the rabbit hole, have been trapped in time and space. One could say the price one pays for spirit descending into matter. The fall or descent into Wonderland is the plunge into a game of extreme dualism, the very game we've been playing. In this way, the story of Alice in Wonderland allegorizes the reality of the living souls and gives us the keys to understanding and unlocking ourselves.
My, if I came this way.
Wonderland is full of wonders, but not necessarily wonderful. The fantasy world is interesting, but leaves Alice feeling incomplete. She finds her way out by realizing at the end it's all just Maya, a veil, a grand illusion. Alice wasn't pleased with the tranquility of her original world. She was bored, so she ends up falling down the rabbit hole into a place that makes absolutely no sense. This is Wonderland. There's no rhyme or reason. Everything is the opposite of what it seems, but at least it's interesting, right? She falls onto the checkerboard after chasing the white rabbit, but not really. The game is played, but like I said, at the end of the story, Alice wakes up unharmed. This is what is happening to us. We're on the checkerboard, a grid designed so we can get rid of the black and white schematic Wonderland offers. Dualism itself overlays on top of the earth until we observe what we see now, a place full of wonder, distractions, diversions, paths, and mind traps. But at the end of the day, it's as illusory as Wonderland was in the story of Alice. The first chapter and opening scene displays Alice in judgment, in discontentment. And I quote, "Alice was beginning to get very tired of sitting by her sister on the bank, and of having nothing to do. Once or twice, she had peeped into the book her sister was reading, but it had no pictures or conversations in it." Now, there's nothing wrong with where she is. In fact, the movie shows her in a beautiful, tranquil environment, but alas, the white rabbit appears, and the white rabbit signifies time, which Alice is keen to plunge into. This is why the rabbit carries around a big old clock. The veil of time is a tool the universe uses to purge and transform, and this transformation for Alice begins once she falls onto the checkerboard. The game is now ready to be played. Sophia has split off from the pleroma, the living souls put on the sine wave. In my video on the purgatory dumping ground, I explained how this environment, locked within time and space, is actually a safe container for the living souls to release their individual and collective baggage, merging back into the original blueprint. Alice derives from the ancient Greek word aletheia, which means truth. So Alice can be translated as truthful one. So Alice is in a virtual reality simulated construct invented by a mind which instilled its own virus into itself by pulling away from the now moment. This is Sophia wishing to create a world of her own, the same way Alice daydreamed of something more interactive. In the world of mathematics, the Fibonacci numbers have been famously generated by calculating the hypothetical offspring of rabbits. Rabbits, falling, spirals. This is all related. Wonderland is the Fibonacci rabbit hole Alice falls into. It's representing the fractalization of an infinite consciousness into a finite perception. This is why after falling on the checkerboard, she is shown going through many doorways, falling further into fractalization until the room she reaches is surrounded by cubes on the wall. This is the squaring of the living soul's consciousness, squaring the circle, which can be related to the flower of life and Metatronic entanglement. We have been in the land of the Fibonacci, the fib of no chi. In my short series on the Metatronic overlay, we talk about the toroidal compression field and how heart energy is contained by a false grid system, which we now know to be purgatorial in nature. This heart energy is the aurora borealis. We talked about the living souls, the finite number of players in this matrix, being the dreamers of this third-dimensional existence, exactly like how Alice dictates before entering Wonderland the conditions, but then finds herself entrapped within her own creation, viewing it as separate from herself. In the Disney version, Alice sings a song before falling down the rabbit hole called In a World of My Own, where she is actually setting up the conditions for the very matrix she is about to plunge into by saying things such as rabbits will live in houses, which she experiences, like the flowers will have special powers, which she experiences. A world of her own essentially means Alice is wishing to be isolated with herself, to confront thyself by having obvious projections and manifestations stare her in the face. So whether she knows it or not, she is already determined that the journey she is to embark on is one of reconciliation. However, she gets caught up in the false dichotomy of light versus dark, of self versus other, until the final realization in which Alice proclaims, "You're nothing but a pack of cards." Alice has an epiphany of sorts and comes to know the true nature of existence, namely, that everything is a facade, Maya, just a dream within a dream. In this moment of truth, Alice realizes within her is a force, a power that nobody else in Wonderland seems to have. And, well, as living souls, we've been called to take a look around and ask, are these people even real? To learn more about soulless beings and the nature of true projection, please watch my video, You Are the AI Dreamer. She runs and runs and eventually merges back into her original body. The Alice who was so desperately trying to find herself, uncomfortable, longing for satisfaction, now has realized the authentic self, something which transcends the belly of the underworld, which was really her own inability to connect with true wisdom. Alice is shown many paths throughout the narrative, but these do nothing but confuse her. Truth is found within, not without. And all paths eventually converge in singularity. Thank you for watching. Take care, everyone.
Sophia comes from the heights, opening up four islands. You'll take a guess at the time twist, but will you feel your brightness? Sophia comes from the heights, from the inside, from the inside. Sophia comes from the heights, from the inside, from the inside.
Sing it, bro. Hey, man. My boy was going off.
A few months ago, I came out with a video on chakras and the as above, so below energy projections. This is a sort of extension of that video. We have these 7 major energy centers that are always reflecting to us what deficiencies our being is interlaced in. When a chakra isn't balanced, we're told, disturbances in the subtle energy of the chakras translate into physical, mental, and emotional manifestation symptoms, which are associated with the corresponding glands and organs of the body. But chakras aren't physical in nature. They are energy centers that influence our being at every level, including physiologically. But what would create disturbances in our energy and thus chakras? And why would we even have these 7 energy containers? Well, these human vessels, these bodies, are the result of genetic engineering which occurred not too far in the distant past in order to place humans in a more vulnerable state to be preyed on energetically, covertly. By combining the genetics of the original divine human, the original steward of Mother Earth, with that of reptilian genetics and with other mammalian components, an energetic enslavement overlay was placed into the human genome. The rough history is as follows. Humans lived in abundance not too far in the past. The human composition, mentally, creatively, and physically, was much more resilient than what we have now. This previous world wasn't a caveman type scenario. We had technology, means of food production, music, ceremonies, dancing, everything culture has to offer us now, except the system wasn't a system of control. It was a system of flow, where the earth was being simultaneously rejuvenated and enlivened through everyday living. The tales of a past golden age throughout mythologies tell us that there was a time when abundance was the name of the game. But somehow, a parasite entered this realm, an invader species whose core essence is that of hierarchy, fear, and inversion. This parasite rearranged reality so quickly and efficiently that they convinced the humans of their core tenets. The ideas of God, salvation, karma, control, dog eat dog, these things were introduced. Mental activities which split our left and right brain unity, such as mathematics, philosophy, and science, were introduced as a way to mentally preoccupy mankind. Distractions were put up. The natural environment was terraformed. We were given a false sense of history, and somehow in this mix, humans underwent a striking transformation through genetic engineering. You see, the original human container did not leak out electromagnetic energy as it does now. Clearly, there is energy being funneled from the heart, and not all of it returns. It's going to the energy centers we know as chakras. This isn't a closed system like it should be. The electromagnetic energy is being tugged at from above and below. So the generator of everything is the 0 point. That's the heart. If I am a parasite, I want to manipulate this system. I can't directly take anything from the heart, but I can create a labyrinth for the energy to flow through, which will guarantee that the energy won't fully return. In order to do this, the parasites needed to weaken our anatomy through creating an endocrine system. This is the system which tells our body what to do. Instead of having the original blueprint of the human, with the heart being the prime source of intelligence and guidance, we now were receiving signals from 6 other locations all at once, through the false light chakra implants working in tandem with the endocrine system. Humans now had a very new experience, receiving compulsory signals from their body. This didn't happen before. Hunger was now felt. Thirst, a hormonal desire to have sex, an intense need to lie down and fall asleep. We think our anatomy is inherently natural, but it's through dividing our heart energy through these 6 other centers that genetic engineering accomplished a way to preoccupy humanity with immense physical limitation. Think of your day. A lot of it is based on how you cater to your body's endocrine messages. We need to make pit stops now, so much of our day is spent trying to calm these bodily signals, or at least battle with them. This is the definition of a system spread thin. It's spreading thin our natural energetic powerhouse capabilities, so none of our sacred vitality builds up enough so we recognize our power. It's a brilliant plan, because if we're not cognizant of this energy extraction being done, we can easily step into situations which are simply about the energy transference from host to parasite. Basically, I'm trying to say, if we identify with the illusion of the physical 100% without discernment, then we will lose ourselves in the matrix overlay. This parasite which entered this realm wasn't something we could just observe with our 5 senses. It was a mind virus which quickly inverted the sacred lifestyle of humankind shortly after its entrance. After changing our anatomy and inserting conflicting genetics into the genome, now we were sinners. We were dirty. We were self-loathing. We felt uncomfortably limited. Thus, the story is a fraudulent alternative history which reinforces this state of limitation. After all, if we believe humans were always beast-like, rudimentary, and slaves to a hyperphysical paradigm, always fighting and feeling insecure, then we eliminate any possibility that humans have potential past this perspective. The visible light spectrum is a part of the same matrix overlay as our chakras. Imagine that. Our chakras make up a rainbow, and these colors make up everything we see with our sense of sight. The frequency spectrum is enormous, but we can only see about 0.0035% of this spectrum. This means our experience is a figment within a larger macrocosmic soup of potential and true existence. A virus acts stealthily when it attaches to a cell. I've talked about this before. Basically, a virus tries to trick a cell to identify with its harmful genetic information. A strong cell is able to avoid being tricked, but a vulnerable cell receives the codes and thinks that the information is inherent to the cell's function. So now the cell is coding a disease or some mutation, thinking it's the real deal, it's the original code. Transpose this concept to our situation. Most of us go about our lives believing the worldview given to us, believing our senses and our bodily impulses as de facto. Many of the processes within us are not from the original blueprint. The physical body is bombarded with artificial stimuli in order to make the inhabiting spirit identify with that perception as an innate, true feeling. This artificial stimuli is what the endocrine system pumps. It's hormones, pheromones, enzymes. These signals are now mandatory to experience via the chakra overlay system. Thus, many of us live lives of restriction, trying to wrestle and agree and oppose all of these different chemical responses that our body is tuning into. This is why most religions and spiritual schools advocate to distance oneself away from the world, to be in the world, but not of the world, to take care of the body, but not be a slave to it. But this isn't doom and gloom. Even in these containers, we still carry our original genetics, no matter how dormant they lie in some of us. The seeds of our past are still woven into our DNA. The way we navigate this matrix determines if we will be assimilated or not. This is why intention determines where we end up. In any given situation, we can choose to reinforce the matrix overlay by staying asleep. No matter how much deception we've been interlaced in, the ability of the heart and mind to come together, to disconnect from identifying with the overlays, is always available. It's always a possible move we can take. These containers are limited, but our essence is infinite and immortal. This is indeed why humans were chosen to be the experiment, to be preyed upon, because we cannot be anything but all-powerful. And when you fractalize that infinite power into a system of limitation, well, it becomes a feeding frenzy for the various entities who are loving this soup of confusion. You could say we're bound into the matrix overlay through the number 7. 7 states of matter, 7 major chakras, 7 colors of the rainbow. This is why it's said that God rested on the 7th day, God being nothing more than the prime hive mind processing unit of the virus, which maintains the energy extraction system. Bound within the visible light spectrum, humans now live an illusion. Our eyes deceive us when we attach ourselves to the restriction. The infinite potential of everything, which we could identify as embodied within a pure white light, has now been separated into the 7 by the mind virus, which is simultaneously a God virus. God, the One, the transcendent, the all-powerful, the all-seeing, the divine. This is the idea that outside the confines of time and space lies a force so good, so harmonizing, so infinite, that the goal of a true spiritual existence would be to merge with it. Spiritual, this word, what does it mean? Well, when something is spiritual, it means that it can be communed with via faith and belief. It's a force that one merges with or channels in order to feel its power. Whether the school of thought is Christianity, Hinduism, New Age, whether God is one or many, the idea of a spiritual realm where a perfectly ordered set of enlightened principles are maintained is consistent throughout every one. Most people have some idea of the enlightened ones, or of a path to heaven, and therefore strive to be a member of this path. It's benign and beautiful, right? To see humans engaged in such dedication and worship. But what if I told you that this surface expression of benevolence and compassion has its roots in a predatory, parasitic force which tirelessly uses groupthink, hive mind, spiritual dogma? The idea of believing in a higher force is based in obedience. It's higher than you. It's something which is so magnificent and powerful that you are small in comparison. That's the idea. And this is the case whether we talk about God as a personified figure or as a formless force to merge with. This all-supreme deity or transcendent source demands worship to be admired and put on a pedestal. Again, let's look at the allegory of a virus. When a virus enters a cell, it aims to confuse that cell to code its information. It essentially tries to manipulate the cell into thinking its information is legitimate and necessary. The virus doesn't want anything else. It wants to assimilate its code, and it wants the cell to be completely submissive to this process. With this comparison, we can look at prayer or admiration of the divine as something akin to merging with a hive mind, which again requires admiration. If you pray to something, after all, you become prey. This is where we get the idea of the pyramid and the all-seeing eye. At the top of this pyramid, we have the parasite central processing unit, which sends its various tentacles downwards to try and assimilate everyone and everything. This is the origin of the paradigm of the false light, a force which feels benevolent and all-loving, but is simply the virus inspiring artificial feel-good emotions and perspectives within a vulnerable host, giving away their sovereign power to merge with a hive. Religion and spirituality are the main tools the false light uses to disarm and assimilate. When we think of spirituality, we often hear of phrases such as the collective and all is one. There's this idea that to be full of wisdom and spiritual truth is to merge with some transcendent force. But this idea makes it clear that spirituality is pretty lifeless. It's not about anything other than submitting oneself to this illusory will of God. I laugh at that because to bow to God or to revere Source is to give up individual creativity. To me, the will of God would be to remain an individual creator amongst other sovereign individuals, not bowing down to some sterile idea of truth and goodness. This central God processing unit is also the origin of hierarchical society and the scarcity-based slave think that comes with such an arrangement. The cold, lifeless, order-obsessed machine can be viewed as AI because it's akin to an automatic process. A virus compulsively infects without thought. Through this falsity of hierarchy, propaganda and disinformation campaigns are used to shape society into a homogeneous, weak-willed hive mind. It might seem that religion and the workforce and all of these cultural manipulations are separate and distinct, but they're all a part of the same hierarchical agenda, which wants conformity. So, you don't want to be religious? Well, you don't have to. There is a cult of culture waiting for your worship. How can we give context to this situation? After all, how did a virus end up here? The situation seems so elusive and unclear. Well, we first must ask the question, where are we in the universe? To many of us, it might seem simple that we live on a flat plane, or in the cosmic egg, or simply on Mother Earth. But this still doesn't describe to us how to think about the macrocosmic situation. If we go back to the virus and cell comparison, we could see a new world order as the end result of complete assimilation. Basically, the virus, the hive mind, wishes to fully corrupt the cell, or it would naturally function.
Pretty much.
The new world order.
Yeah.
But this entire process requires consent. We've all heard the literary idea of the vampire who requires an invitation to prey off another individual. The reason this agenda is so covert, meaning we've been implanted with energy centers and cut off from extrasensory perceptions via genetic engineering, is because it's up to us to decide if we will be consumed by the virus or not. If we choose to be consumed by the illusion, by the visible light spectrum, by the signals of our body, by everything laid as trappings around us, then we're giving the okay to be fed off of. If we want to identify with every emotion, every physiological feeling, then we choose to identify with the beast-like manipulated nature above the stable sacred nature of our being. Upon realizing the immensity of the matrix overlay, we can start utilizing our discernment to navigate life. This is the great battle that we fight each day. If God, or the hive mind, is the alpha and the omega, then obviously there's a time when this parasite will no longer have enough energy to maintain itself. Time, as we've discussed before, is a force related to Saturn, or Satan. If time has a beginning and end, and God is the alpha and omega, then God is simply time. Time itself is a hive mind virus that has no relevance in the grand scheme of true non-overlaid reality. So God, time, the chakra system, the energy extraction, has a beginning and an end. By definition. However, we, as living souls temporarily bound in this paradigm, do not have a beginning and an end. We are the true infinite, the true creative force that cannot be eliminated, only manipulated. The components of the original creation, the energetics, are still here for our grasping and cultivation. By disconnecting from the artificial overlay, we can learn how to pull ourselves out of being manipulated, out of the fractalization of the energy extraction God, false light, groupthink scheme. To do this requires the principles of care.
Elevate your mind.
On all fronts.
Elevate your motherfucking mind, cuz.
This is a binary AI type system. This process of assimilation doesn't use intelligence, only cold processes that reinforce the hierarchy. Basically, there's no creativity. The overlays can manipulate all they want, but unless we give into that restrictive binary consciousness, we remain resilient. us on the path to truth have become enamored with these concepts of chakras, of a kundalini rising, of a collective source of oneness in which we can submit to. These things seem very attractive. However, what are we feeling when we're feeling a kundalini rising? What are we doing when we're actually visualizing and trying to balance overactive or underactive chakras? I think we should question these things. We should question these things because if deception runs as deep as these energetic overlays, then that means we are sandwiched between this very strange reality and this very real reality. And so we're somewhere in the middle. We're undergoing this consistent tug of war between the infinite part of ourselves, which has become temporarily involved in the system, and the false concept of us within this system, which has all of these hormones and bodily responses, and therefore has a very energetically thin framework, like I said earlier in this video. So the ideas of spirituality as they've been handed to us should absolutely be questioned, just as much as, say, anything we're watching on the news. And this is why, whether you want to connect with God or you want to spend your life chasing money or fame, or if you want to be a good person, there are all of these pre-programmed paradigms for you to fall into, so you do not expand in the way that you most effectively could. We've seen the images of angels, and most of us, when we envision some kind of etheric heavenly paradise, we think of lots of beings singing and in unison, and maybe they all are carrying this immense amount of light, and it sounds good. But to me, this homogenization is reflective more of a parasitic hive mind that doesn't truly wish to have sovereign individuals with their own talents, their own creative pursuits, their own interests, just like, by the way, many of the Greek gods, the Hindu gods, gods and goddesses of mythologies are not homogenized. They are all individuals. And so I see this idea of heaven, of some transcendent paradise, as quite juvenile, overly simplistic, and it's confusing our ability to go within with submitting to something divine, when this is already divine. What you're experiencing right now is divine, because it is your energy, which signifies that something has what would truly be the touch of God, the touch of divinity. Let's make this comparison. You can have a room that is incredibly clean and sterile and organized, and it can look very nice, but deep down, what kind of energy is responsible for this environment which seems very lifeless, you know? So let's compare that room with a room with lots of pillows around it, and there's paintings everywhere, and maybe there's even a painting that accidentally got stepped on, so nothing in this room is 100% perfect. Well, I would say you have something which is overly ordered, and something which is full of chaos and order. And that is the paradigm we have to cultivate within ourselves right now if we want to break free. And we have to recognize that this bullshit idea of spiritual purity is an overly ordered AI binary consciousness. It's not the kind of thing we naturally would insert ourselves in. We need spontaneity. We need contrast. We can't have homogenization. And that is desperately what this force wants to do. If the virus can weaken humanity, then humanity will submit. They will not feel their vitality. And if humanity does not feel their vitality, then essentially they become sucked into this parasitic force. If you're watching this video, if you're aligned with this gnosis, then you have really maintained your own. And I applaud you in that. So, of course, there's a lot of mystery. There's a lot of unanswered questions. And most things we won't be able to figure out. But that shouldn't matter. What should matter is that we take daily solace in our ability to not be assimilated. And you know what? If we take a few steps back, we take a few steps forward. We are the living souls.
Big Fat Podcast.
When we first encounter the idea of suffering, the idea that as human beings we inherently will suffer until death, when we look at this idea in relation to necessity, then we can learn a lot about suffering and about what it means to actually inhabit a human body. So let me start off by saying a man is masculine energy embodied and a woman is feminine energy embodied. So when we see a male and a female, we're not seeing just two physically different beings. We are literally viewing the law of gender funneling itself and playing itself out through the physical. So we then get to the idea of merging the masculine and feminine. It's said that the most harmonious creation occurs when we do that, when we can take the masculine parts of ourselves, meaning the courageous aspect, merge that with the feminine, which is the passive, the muse, so to speak, the healer. But when we look at a man and a woman, we don't need to look at these energies as metaphorical. We can literally see the male energy and the female energy come together. And this is necessary in order to create a child. So we have this trinity, the man, the woman, and the child. And this is a reflection of the necessity of breaking ourselves into man and woman. Even in the spiritual community, there's a lot of talk about becoming androgynous. And I'm telling you, this is not really productive because you cannot be in creation if the law of the land is androgyny, physical androgyny. So if I'm going to plummet into a realm, say Earth, if I'm going to encase myself in this 3D creation, then I need to make sure there's a way for other people to participate in this game as well. Because if there's not that opportunity, well, it's not really a dynamic realm. So in order to make sure other people, other souls, other parts of spirit have the ability to enter Earth, we have males and females who have complementary yet opposite physical parts and energies and mental energies, which necessarily come together in order to allow more spirit to funnel into this realm. So creation doesn't happen unless the divided opposites are coming together in sacred union. This creates kind of an awkward situation for us because we're told that duality is the cause of much suffering, if not all suffering. But it is duality playing itself out on the physical earthly stage. It is only by that mechanism that we actually have creation. I'm literally proposing that unless we have male and female, we do not have creation. But in order to have male and female, we need to separate consciousness into two containers that must come together in order to fulfill not only that physical action of procreation, but also the inner alchemy. It's this beautiful but confusing mess. We want to experience highs and lows and contrasts, and we want to compare how one thing feels against another thing. We want to be able to experience the depths of destruction and the highs of salvation. And why do we do this? Well, it's because creation itself is that dramatic. It's that dramatic because in order to get into creation, in order to create the conditions where spirit could actually come into a realm like this, we had to make some sacrifices. And one of those sacrifices, you could say, was foregoing any androgyny, splitting ourselves into opposing halves which need each other. And that's a very interesting concept, that two beings need each other in order to sustain something most effective and productive for society. It's beautiful. And the reason we have this necessity is because inherently we feel estranged from our opposite half. So we already feel broken and like we're not embodying the fullness of our dual-gendered nature. And this is why love and romance is the main topic of discussion in most art, because this is the primary drama that's happening. It is the drama of trying to reconcile this feeling of brokenness, of fragmentation, trying to piece that together. Now, relationships also are full of pain, because after all, everything on this earthly plane, if it consists of pleasure, if it's worth pursuing, then it also contains a great deal of pain. And so a relationship which produces a child, which creates life, literally, is inherently going to be full of suffering. And because a child is being produced, birth and death is now in the mix even more so. There's another birth, and there will now be another death because there's another birth. So that is kind of confusing. It's like we've produced a child that's temporarily going to be here and might have a very productive, meaningful existence. But he or she is going to die. And in some sense, that is your fault. Like, I guess we could get into religious or spiritual ideas about reincarnation and who really chooses how events unfold, but for all intents and purposes, you created this child and its fate is your fault. And we see what children go through. I mean, even if you look a few hundred years ago when there wasn't a crazy New World Order agenda, at least glaring at us as it is right now, even then, being a child was not always the happiest. And the fact is, being a human just isn't always the happiest. So, it's this weird idea I'm trying to express, that gender and suffering and duality are all in the same basket and they require each other. And existence is, I guess, the container, if you will, because without any of these elements working hand in hand like I'm describing, you can't have existence. You need a mechanism for more spirit to crawl into a realm. It's like if you go into a multiplayer game or you're playing some video games, you want to leave some controllers open, or you want to let your friends know how to log into the game. So it's literally not possible to jump into a realm and make the law of the land androgyny. You need some gendered aspect. You need some gendered aspect in order to birth more creation into a realm. Now, if we move away from men and women and we look at something like our thoughts or our actions, how can we identify these things as masculine or feminine? And how I like to see it is masculinity is full of order, is full of regulation, whereas feminine energy is full of chaos and uncertainty and spontaneity, rather. And so we have that balance between order and chaos that produces the most exciting and stable existence. And this is a really tough balance to achieve. Most of us never learn how to do this 100%. It's like you want things to be organized and in order and predictable, but at the same time you want to be able to enjoy yourself, which would be injecting some chaos, and you want to be able to have some spontaneity with life, because if you don't, if you're not flexible, then there's nothing you can do here. So we have this decision to make at all times. It's whether to apply more order or more chaos to a situation. We're obsessed with love. We're obsessed with needing each other. And that, I would say, is the condition of all beings, not just humans. All beings need each other. And it's natural to us to need each other, and I would say this is completely aligned with gender, because we needed to split into gender to exist, and now we search for each other because each other is really ourselves. And it's this complicated allegory that we can't really overthink, because then we might get too scientific. Like, I understand it doesn't make much sense that everybody else is you, but if you look at yourself as the measurement of the universe, and everyone else as a fractal of you, you realize it's all the same game being played out. So how amazing is it that we can feel lonely and that we can need each other? It's the product of suffering. Because when we need things, when we have desire, we suffer. And it's easy to say that I can get rid of my desire and therefore I don't need anybody. But that is an oxymoron of existence. The fact that we need to be sovereign and individual, but we also need each other so dearly. So, no man is an island, and that is what gender, really looking into it, that's what it tells me. I am Hermes, messenger of the gods. The Matrix virus is a viral, parasitic consciousness that has been spread and incorporated into the masses. Its goal has been to change a human being's internal state into one that accepts and reflects the dominance-submission polarity, which translates into the inability to grasp a true sense of harmony and thus liberation. This virus is apparent to those of us who have halted our interaction with it and taken conscious notice of its true effects and motivation. Why do I say virus? Well, let's look at the viruses which attack our bodies. A virus cannot reproduce by itself. It needs to parasite off of a cell in order to make copies. A virus is not really alive. It's more like a program. Your cells need to be tricked into assimilating its information. What happens is a virus injects a cell sequence for your cell's DNA to express. Your enzymes then need to read that program in order to create what the virus tells them to create. A virus can only infect us when our cells decide to incorporate its information through confusion that it's its own sequences. And this happens when our immune systems are down and we're in a less than ideal state of health. This is a reflection of the very matrix virus which has infected this realm. We become susceptible to absorbing it through disharmonious archetypes, thought forms, and mannerisms when we are not fully integrated within our heart, mind, and spirit. Without this inherent level of well-being, we automatically submit ourselves to the matrix virus. Viruses can only affect us when we are in a vulnerable state. One person can get a virus, say warts, and express that once, but another person might keep expressing it over and over again. Why is this? It's because the one that only expresses it once has a body that figured out the artificiality of the virus's sequences. It's like the cells stand up and say, "Everybody in the body, you don't have to assimilate with this. We can choose not to code these sequences, and we're better off for it." And if the body refuses to work with that virus, well, the virus has no other options. It disintegrates. It's a program. It has no creativity or elasticity like the body. In summary, if your cells read a virus and refuse to follow its instructions, the virus is considered null and void. Transpose this to the situation in this realm. Most of the population have already forfeited their sovereignty and thus their ability to become fully integrated beings, because they have submitted to the, quote, sequences which the Matrix has inserted. Those who have confused these programs as real, unwavering, and a normal part of reality are like the bodies which consistently confuse a virus's genetic sequences as its own. But the living souls are becoming more and more observant. We're becoming lucid in this dream. We've pushed through the Matrix virus, and we all agree we choose stability and to maintain our awareness. We refuse to be assimilated. Those who are assimilated are what we could term non-player characters, organic portals, or soulless beings. They are beyond the point of returning to a true connection with spirit. We look at the TV, we look at the lives of our old friends, classmates, loved ones, and intuitively know there is something fundamentally skewed within their paradigms, and they can even seem artificial, robotic. In a way, that's true. We're existing side by side with beings who are resonating with completely different structures of thought and action, and these structures are now recognized for what they are. They are nothing more than programs meant to divert our energy. This is why we call it the energy extraction matrix. After all, a virus's only purpose is to confuse the body to assimilate its information. But we're not confused any longer. The main goal for this parasitic consciousness is to provoke engagement with humans via an argument, a problem, something which puts us in reaction mode. The entire process of this assimilation is akin to a binary schematic that feeds on the interaction of organic consciousness by using trial and error to come up with the best methods that provoke an emotional response. The Matrix virus aims to ridicule, turn people against one another, and propagate scarcity consciousness through establishing a system which, when one is fully submitted to, puts one in a constant state of unease, mistrust of others, reactivity, and overall disconnection. All of this suppresses and eventually shatters the ability to be a generator for harmonious intentions. However, if the parasite is forced to stand alone and sustain itself without these reactions, then this starves the parasite, and its behavior becomes more extravagant and outward, thus enabling detection. So what have we seen in the public eye? Increasing attempts to direct attention and thus energy towards different catastrophes, political problems, terrorist attacks, shootings, overall, orchestrated events which have no organic basis. The world is not going to shit. I know this seems backwards, but this is a wonderful sign that the Matrix virus is getting desperate. It's not gaining the energy it could achieve in the past. And in furthering its attempts to sustain itself, we've actually woken up because of how blatant, how obvious these attempts to redirect our energy are. We can all feel it. The parasite is dying off. The best thing to do right now is remain detached from current events and focus on developing further completion within yourself. I have many videos on how to do this, on reconciling the mind, the heart, the shadow. The virus's eventual degradation is set in stone. We are the living souls of Asgard. We know who we are. We are here to hold down the fort of Mother Earth, of Mother Shaishea. A virus is only as good as its ability to infect. And what is this virus in this reality looking for? Well, it's not looking for just any type of energy. It's looking for divine energy. It's looking for the nourishing breath of spirit, of heart. It's operating under a binary system, meaning it doesn't actually have creativity. It doesn't have the ability to pause and figure things out. It's more like a computational code which keeps trying to divert our attention which keeps trying to feed off of our reactions, but how can we react if we're not paying attention to it? How can we react if we refuse to turn on the TV? If we refuse to give in to dualism and the bullshit polarities which have been fed to us? There's no way this virus can infect us once we realize what its manifestations are. And we know that we're here to heal ourselves and thus heal this external holographic projection, which is about to be stripped away just like a holographic overlay. There's no way this virus can infect us once we realize what it is, how it operates, how it can cloak itself as an organic situation, as an organic feeling. You guys want to know where the event is? Look right in front of me. Yep. The rainbow is here. The rainbow light has been pouring into this realm, increasing. I am Hermes, messenger of the gods. We are all familiar with the ego, but many of us have misunderstood what the ego truly is. The ego is the center of consciousness, a function that allows you to distinguish yourself from others. Many spiritual teachers stamp the ego as a detrimental part of ourselves, claiming we must distance ourselves from it. But it's truly not possible to dissolve your ego, for it's the structure that orders your unique qualities in a way that differentiates yourself from others. It's the sense of personal identity. There is another part of ourselves called the unconscious, which remains in the background, but it is in no way inactive. The unconscious compromises everything within that remains hidden, unexpressed, and therefore repressed. This unconscious inevitably expresses itself in everything we do, think, say, and feel, although we are mostly unaware of its effects. The unconscious cannot be contained. It is constantly trying to bring us into balance, into a state of completeness. And this oftentimes comes out in the form of disharmonious thoughts, actions, and attitudes towards oneself and the world. Individuation is the process by which one becomes the true self, an infinite expression of uniqueness and self-sufficiency at a microcosmic level. It is the goal of what spiritual schools call enlightenment, and individuation is a process which aids the collective into widespread realization, for each man who finds this true self adds a piece to the ascensional puzzle on earth. The self is often seen as something we automatically know, but in the context of individuation, the self is very hidden. It is the ego which we know. The self is what we are in essence, the perfect unified being. To be the self is the goal of this entire experience. We could therefore translate individuation as coming to selfhood, ultimate self-realization, the quest for totality. Many religions and esoteric schools have long held the belief that growth is about breaking down the self in order to serve others. But this is the opposite of the truth. It's only when we become centered within our own vessel that we can most effectively be a source of inspiration and guidance for the world. Let's look at the persona. The persona is the image we aim to project onto others of ourselves, the mask that pretends individuality. Although a persona may seem real to oneself and others, it is nothing more than a well-played role. The persona is a compromise one creates between himself and others regarding how one appears to be. This could be a set of personality traits which correspond to a title, an occupation, or a specific image one has convinced themselves as being favorable. In the persona, a musician, a misfit, an intellectual, but these are simply masks, ways we would like to be or appear to other people. The persona reveals what we value for ourselves, but also hides our true nature, and is mostly used to accommodate what we feel others wish for ourselves. Identifying the persona is crucial in the process of individuation. One must take a good look in the mirror and ask themselves, what persona do I aim to project? What masks do I wear? Identify this persona and realize that it is a farce and has little to do with the underlying aspects of your true self. Religious and spiritual dogma can oftentimes make us feel that we can just create the persona of a self-realized person. This is a prime barrier in this process. We must discard every persona we've conjured up in the past. No matter who you are or your background, there is a persona that can be shed. Let's look at the shadow. The shadow is a part of the unconscious mind consisting of repressed weaknesses, shortcomings, emotions, attitudes, and even instincts. Most of us have been raised to suppress instead of express. We are told as children to act a specific way, to avoid certain behaviors and thoughts, and this creates a mechanism of suppression within the psyche. The inner shadow retreats to an unconscious state, primitive and undifferentiated. Then, when the shadow breaks through this repressive barrier, and this does happen once in a while, it manifests itself in a sinister, pathological way, and is often further repressed because of how uncomfortable it feels. This repression, as we discussed in the individuation introduction video, can create a loop of suffering if unaddressed. And this suffering is a huge contributor in the energy extraction matrix system, which is nothing more than what happens when our shadows remain hidden and therefore used against us by our so-called leaders and governments, who consistently funnel fear-based programming, which further grows the personal and collective shadow of humanity. When one tries to see his shadow, he becomes conscious and often ashamed of the characteristics and impulses that he denies in himself, but sees clearly in other people. It could be greed, laziness, egotism, unreal fantasies, indifference, anger, all those parts of ourselves we readily accept in the world, but not within us. Phrases like, "the world is a scary place," and "humans are naturally evil," are rooted in the concept that the disharmony is orchestrated externally and not internally. But it's a rule that if an aspect of ourselves is not expressed and incorporated within, it will be expressed without. Essentially, we project outwards what we haven't inwardly resolved. The shadow is all those uncivilized desires and emotions that are incompatible with the norms of society and with our ideal personality. It is all that we're ashamed of, that we do not wish to be. But this judgment of the shadow being undesirable, again, leads to inevitably expressing the shadow. The unconscious leaks into the conscious, and before we know it, we are experiencing the disharmony we so aimed to ignore. The shadow snowballs, gets bigger and bigger as we further repress ourselves in the name of maintaining our persona. So a crucial step in individuation is the confrontation and thus assimilation of the shadow. Again, the shadow represents the aspects which are rejected by the ego, but which are projected in other people as belonging to them. It's the darkness which we have separated from our wholeness. Looking at oneself and admitting to jealous, greedy, selfish, narcissistic tendencies, this is making the darkness conscious. It's realizing one's moral deficiencies without the filter of the persona. And through this practice, one finds that the darkness all along was just a coping mechanism, a seed of trauma planted early on in one's development. This makes the darkness actually appear cute and in desperate need of unconditional love, not repression. let's look at the anima and animus. Just as males and females are outwardly different, yet complementary, there are dormant inverse energies within. Anima, in the unconscious of the male, is the inner feminine personality. Animus, in the unconscious of the female, is the inner masculine personality. So the anima and animus are the opposite gendered parts of ourselves, which can be realized and fully developed to erect the true self. To put in another way, there is in the unconscious of each man an inherent image of woman who helps him understand her being, and in the unconscious of each woman an inherent image of man who helps her to understand his being. When the anima is not fully integrated, the man can express without conscious control greed, moodiness, egotism, and the inability to relate to others. But when the anima in a man is fully integrated, he can access the parts of himself which are self-nurturing, creative, empathetic, intuitive, and longing to relate to others harmoniously. When the animus in a woman is not fully integrated, a woman can express unconsciously a domineering, boastful, and emotionally uncontrollable personality. But when the animus in a woman is fully integrated, she can access the parts of herself which are rational, centered, strong, and full of divine courage. In the context of resolving dualism, the incorporation and development of our inner opposite is absolutely necessary. A man projects his anima onto typically one woman at a time, usually his partner or lover. These projections that I'm going to talk about, they're archetypes which are representative of the inner opposite and the state of that. An undeveloped anima is like Marilyn Monroe, a physically and sexually attractive female who embodies external beauty and enchantment. A much more developed anima would be Mary Poppins, a strong, independent woman who is equally kind, loving, and in touch with her femininity. The ultimate developed anima would be the Virgin Mary, the embodiment of the complete divine feminine, transcending the limitations of this world. A woman projects her animus on men in her life, but unlike the typically singular projection of the anima, this projection happens to many, if not all men, in a woman's life. An undeveloped animus is like Tarzan, a brute man who exhibits physical but not mental or spiritual endurance. A much more developed animus would be James Bond, a smart, courageous, and capable man who has both physical and mental appeal. The ultimate developed animus would be like Jesus Christ, the embodiment of the true sacred masculine, who is full in his power in all ways. So whatever state of anima and animus one projects outwardly is representing that state within. So to realize the state of your anima or animus, ask yourself a question. What do you find when you think of a desirable woman or man? Is it sexual attraction, a strong leader, someone who is nurturing, a tyrant? What is the image that is conjured? This image will tell you the state of your inner dormant inverse energies, and by default will reveal what must be developed or emphasized in order to further that image into something more transcendent. The next step in the process of individuation is the encounter with the archetypes of the wise old man and the great mother. These images embrace our unfiltered divine wisdom, the meaning and significance of life. The wise man and great mother are archetypes symbolizing a universal and timeless wisdom. The encounter with these archetypes is what spiritual schools have called interacting with the higher self, being able to find wisdom within everything, not because we were told there is wisdom there, but because our intuition guides us and tells us so. At this step, The self is finally able to be uncovered and experienced, but this isn't a universal consciousness or hive mind that you're tapping into. Like we said at the beginning, individuation is the process of realizing full awareness of our unique nature and our intimate connection with ourselves and thus our surroundings. In summary, the individuation process is as follows: identification and thus stripping of the persona and its inherent falsehoods, the extraction and thus transmutation of the shadow, the parts of ourselves which have remained repressed and thus projected onto external reality, the reconciliation with our inner masculine and feminine aspects and how they are projected onto others, the encounter with the archetypal wise old man and great mother, the divine teacher within that is accessed through bringing the unconscious into the conscious. This is generally not a process which can be completed in a specific time frame. The unconscious cannot be completely assimilated. It is practically infinite in its manifestations. This is why this process is always going on within one who is aiming to achieve true self-realization. Our intentions guide our path and pave the way for expansion. So one must first have the inner fire that says, I want to become whole and truly know thyself. Careful observation of one's thought forms and actions and how they correspond and manifest lead us into realizing our unconscious and thus the perils of swinging from one extreme to another. We must heal. After all, if we cannot heal ourselves, we cannot effectively create the change that many of us feel is so desperately needed in the world. I am Hermes, messenger of the gods, eternally at your service.
There is a legend said to date back thousands of years, and reference a mythical land that can be found in various ancient texts. This legend comes with a prophecy. When the gradual deterioration of mankind, as the ideology of materialism spreads over the earth, and barbarian forces who follow this ideology are united under an evil leader, and think there is nothing left to conquer, the mists will lift to reveal the snowy mountains of an ancient city. This evil force will attack with a huge army, equipped with terrible weapons. Then the king of this city will emerge from this ancient place with a huge army to vanquish those dark forces and usher in a worldwide golden age. Some believe that we are about to leave these times.
The legend of Shambhala has been one of the favorite motives of Tibetan Buddhism and similar religions throughout the centuries. It's a mythical paradise spoken of in the Kala Chakra Tantra and the ancient scriptures of the Zhang culture, which predated Tibetan Buddhism. For some, Shambhala represents a mystical country, revealing itself only to the chosen ones, while others perceive it as a symbol of the hidden treasures of the heart. Shambhala is said to be the land of 1,000 names. It's been called the Forbidden Land, the land of white waters, land of radiant spirits, land of living fire, land of the living gods, and land of wonders. The Hindus call it Aryavarsha, and to the Russians it is known as Belovedai. But throughout Asia, it is best known by its Sanskrit name, Shambhala, which can be roughly translated as place of peace or place of silence. The etymology of Shambhala suggests something profoundly divine, deriving from Persian roots meaning elevated candle or divine light. Sham is Persian for candle or light, and Bala means elevated, raised, or divine. Another name for Shambhala is Shangri-La. If we take out the H, we get Sangri-La, which is very similar to the Portuguese word Sangra. Its root Sangral means Holy Grail, connecting this legend of Shambhala to the Holy Grail itself, which we will explore in a future episode. According to Tibetan descriptions, the kingdom of Shambhala is shaped like a gigantic 8-petaled lotus. Around the perimeter of the lotus is a circular range of lofty, snow-covered mountains. Between the 8 petals of the lotus are 8 lower mountain ranges, along which flow the rivers of Shambhala. There are 120 million cities in each of the petals of the lotus, making 960 million cities altogether. The center of Shambhala is surrounded by a smaller range of snow mountains, and within this inner ring sits Kapala, the capital of Shambhala. In Kapala, there are magnificent palaces constructed with precious metals and gems, gold and silver. Only the pure of heart in Shambhala. It's a place where love and wisdom reigns, and where people are immune to suffering, toil, and old age. There is no war or fighting. It's said that all of them are extremely wealthy, but have no need to use their wealth. It is written, luminous, immense, verdant, stately, and eternal. The kingdom of Shambhala is hidden, a towering range of impenetrable, glistening snow mountains, formed from time, frozen by the anger, lust, and ignorance of egoic fixation, completely surrounds it. In each province, farms, forests, lakes, and towns adorn the land, as dew in sunlight sparkles on a lotus's outstretched petals. This is the land where the intrinsic sacredness of humanity has never been lost, and is always whole.
Shambhala is not an ordinary country or realm, although those with special affiliation may actually be able to go there through their karmic connection. Nevertheless, is not a physical place that we can actually find. We can only say that it's a pure land in the human realm, and unless one has the merit, one cannot actually arrive there. The Kala Chakra prophesies a future war, but this does not conflict with the vows of Buddhist teachings that prohibit violence. We must understand and interpret the war symbolically. The Kala Chakra is not advocating violence against people, but only refers to the inner battle of the human race against inner demonic tendencies. Even the Christian Bible refers to this same subject. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Over many centuries, numerous explorers and seekers of spiritual wisdom have embarked on expeditions and quests in search of the mythical paradise of Shambhala. And while many have claimed to have been there, no one has yet provided any evidence of its existence or been able to pinpoint its physical location on a map. Such pure domain demands protection and secret. For that reason, false breadcrumbs were given away to distract the mind of the impure, making them run in circles, for they were never worthy of such a prize.
The Tibetans maintain that the king of the world resides in Shambhala and has been patiently waiting for hundreds and thousands of years for an opportunity to lead his army out of his kingdom to destroy the darkness that covers the world during its final days. The king of the world possesses a giant glass mirror that enables him to see all that is happening miles away. He is in touch with all the thoughts of those who direct the destiny of mankind. He knows their true intentions and ideas. According to the 20th century explorer Nicholas Roerich, the king of the world is the true authority on earth, and reference to him can be found in every tradition. He is associated with the name Manu amongst the Hindus, Metatron among the Kabbalists, and Melchizedek in the Judeo-Christian tradition. His abode is sometimes called Agartha, a place analogous to the Siddhashram of the yogis, or the Shambhala of the Tibetan Buddhists. The very real fact of the king of the world has been buried out of sight in the West or distorted by supposing that the king is an authority solely of the material domain. The true king of the world unifies both material and spiritual authority in himself, and is not a satanic or even demiurgic principle. While the ancient texts don't specifically make this connection, Shambhala is at the center of Bhumandala, the Vedic depiction of the universe. Mount Meru in various accounts stands high in the center of Shambhala, as well as in the center of Bhumandala. Mount Sumeru, or Meru, is a huge sacred mountain in the center of on the vertical axis of Meru lies all planes of existence, laying on top of one another. In the Buddhist mythology, Mount Meru exists at the same time in both the physical and the spiritual plane, and the golden palace of the gods is located on top. It is surrounded by 7 rings of golden mountains, each separated from each other by sea. Above Meru rise a series of heavens, growing increasingly ethereal as they ascend, and below are a series of torturous hells. It is guarded at the 4 cardinal points by 4 celestial guardians who defend the world by keeping away the fallen gods. Mount Meru depictions extend far outside Tibetan Buddhism and the myths of Shambhala, which suggests that the cosmology of Shambhala, being at the center of our flat realm, at the North Pole, may not be so far from the truth.
Shambhala cannot be located in the mountainous regions of Eurasia, or in India, or in Siberia, and definitely not hidden inside a remote abandoned monastery in Tibet, claimed to be guarded by beings known as the Shambhala Guardians. None of these places can hold 120 million cities. Therefore, the size of this hidden realm is impossible to describe, and to protect it was placed out of the eyes of the ordinary man, and its location removed from our cartography. The Hindu parallels of Shambhala are so strikingly similar that they might put into question the origin of the Tibetan myth. According to the Hindus, the periods of darkness and golden age constantly succeed one another. The Puranas state, wealth and piety will decrease day by day until the world will be wholly depraved. Then property alone will confer rank. Wealth will be the only source of devotion. Passion will be the sole bond of union between the sexes. Falsehood will be the only means of success of litigation. Doesn't this sound like the world we're in today? We are, after all, in the Iron Age, in the final days of the Kali Yuga. Hindu mythology states, when the Dark Ages have reached their lowest point, Vishnu the Preserver manifests himself in human form. He will reincarnate as Kalki in Shambhala and lead the great army against the evil forces. He will then re-establish righteousness upon earth, and the minds of those who live at the end of the age of strife shall be awakened, and shall be pellucid as crystal. The men who are thus changed by virtue of that peculiar time shall be as seeds of human beings, and shall give birth to a race who shall follow the laws of the golden age of purity. In our opinion, this is an allegory. The living, righteous souls in these outer lands are the manifested aspects of Vishnu. We are those who will be undertaking the most glorious of all pursuits, getting to the center, to the North Pole, to Shambhala, and therefore re-establishing a new golden age. Humanity has lost its place in the world, lives in permanent oblivion. Something has been missing, but few know what has been lost to them. Humans have failed to follow the heart, and instead follow a mind that when disengaged from its center is broken and sick. For some, the forgetting of their divine roots is a blessing. But for the elect, the urgency to return is more evident day after day. We have already found what has been forgotten, and now it's time for you to find out too. This oblivion will not last. It's time to remember.
The North Pole is the portal. North Pole is an anagram for porthole. Porthole refers to a small circular window typically used in ships and aircraft. This window, though, goes by another name, bull's eye. Why would a ship's window be called a bull's eye? The same phrase anagrammed by North Pole. It is because the center of this realm is the bull's eye, the center of the toroidal field, the grand exit portal. The only way to truly know what you are is to observe what you aren't. The process of discovery is really the process of canceling out inverted aspects of reality in order to let the authentic, heart-based, non-dual consciousness be channeled. In layman's terms, we have been ensnared in a game of frustration, oppression, suppression, and inauthenticity intended to invigorate the game players, the living souls, to find the heart once again. And that is almost accomplished. The throne at the center is opening up very soon. Nothing is as it seems in this matrix. Oftentimes, current events tell us encoded messages, and this recent event, the burning of the Notre Dame Cathedral, is telling the living souls that we're almost about to undergo this return to the North. How can I make this claim? Let me explain. Notre, which sounds very much like north, rearranged is norte, the Portuguese word for north. Notre Dame means Our Lady, but it's really referring to Our Lady at the North. Abbreviated, we have ND. The numerical value of N is 14. The numerical value of D is 4. Together, reading as 144, a number most of us recognize as related to ascension, transformation, the return back to Eden as spoken of in Revelation. The cathedral was burning, and fire itself represents renewal, transmutation. After all, what is burned down allows for new growth to occur. So we have a message to the living souls. The 144, Our Lady at the North, is on fire. What does this remind you of? This girl is on fire! Yup. Girl on Fire by Alicia Keys. The song's music video is saturated with the emerald green color. This is the Aurora Borealis. The song is a divine message about the protection of our supreme mother goddess. It's about motherhood. And it's demonstrating that the goddess's emanation, Aurora, is a nurturing force which has been protecting the living souls throughout this time in Shadowland. This highly creative, hyperdimensional Northern Lights energy is burning. That is the message. The green flame of the heart is about to be unleashed. The return to Eden. The return to Avalon. 144. This is a message to us. It's become a standard response in the truther community that all mainstream events are staged with malintent. But when we can step out of the illusion of us versus them, if we can observe symbols and synchronicity as pointing to a divine collective condition, then the burning of Notre Dame Cathedral is one of the most powerful signs that transformation, ascension, the return to the center is right around the corner. I thought I would cover this real quick. I usually never make videos on current events, but this message was incredibly powerful, and I thought I would share. Thank you to Neo Glimmer and all living souls. Take care.
Appreciate you, Pete. What else you got?
Battle that can never be won. This type of comparison sucks the joy out of life because the right good, the evil, the saved, the damned. These categorizations are not fundamental to existence. These categorizations are the result of creating opposing forces within ourselves, playing out a game of tug-of-war that can never be resolved, because these polarities require tension in order for these extremes of consciousness to be sustained. Spiritual growth is often categorized as an ascent or descent to a higher state of consciousness or a lower state. This is embodied within the archetypes of heaven and hell, God and the devil, angels and demons, devas and asuras. These categorizations display the product of eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, meaning any judgment that comes through the lens of two opposing forces that require each other to exist is stepping away from wholeness. Good and evil are two sides of the same dualistic coin, a false dichotomy. On this journey of expansion, we are learning to move past these fragmented perspectives. Good and evil, after all, creates a battle that can never be won. This type of comparison sucks the joy out of life because it sets up an invisible mental enemy, unnecessary division. And at the core, there is really no division between anything at all. There is only one thing, one reality, one experience which dances through the lens of infinitely different roles, directions, masks, actions, and personas. What if we could transcend the oppositions of this or that? What if we defined existence as inherently harmonious without the tug or pull of higher and lower concepts? What if we lived each day without trying to tip the scale on either end of dualism, with the full knowingness that everything is already perfect? Remembering who you are at the core flies in the face of everything you've been told, because it's not a mental process. The mind will never resolve itself through itself. No problem can ever be resolved through creating labyrinths for the problem to flow through. What I'm trying to say is, if we use solely logic to figure out our place in the universe, how to act and interact within and without, ignoring intuition, then we end up in the sort of mental gymnastics dualism offers, trying to solve ourselves through grasping to cerebral concepts. The heart, on the other hand, is the 0 point. We call it the singularity because it is the source, the one consciousness emanating outward, projecting the one into the interconnected dream time we're currently inhabiting. It's so common to think that life is happening to us that we get stuck in the mental through giving into illusion. In doing so, we detach from the present moment, conjuring up ways to solve this or that, daydreaming about these concepts as universal truths, creating a sort of subconscious overlord, akin to God or an all-powerful deity. And this is perhaps where the concept of an external deity or a judgmental force originated, in maintaining concepts of good and evil, of right and wrong, of pure and impure. These cognitive concepts have no basis in the present moment, where nothing can be determined using binary measurements, where everything is a full breath and song, playing itself as color within your own dream. Every moment is what it is, and to dissect it more is to do consciousness itself a disservice. Life is but a dream. That song, Row, Row, Row Your Boat, it's describing to us the wisdom which is automatic, which is inherent, which flows effortlessly when we are not holding ourselves hostage, keeping ourselves a prisoner of the mind. We should row our boats, navigate ourselves gently down the stream, and merrily engaged in the journey of life without worrying about falling into the pits of our own creation. Flow state is what happens when one sheds the illusions of the energy extraction matrix, when one takes time to hold space for their emptiness and renewal. Flow state is what happens when we rest on the inner knowingness that everything is already done and healed. There is nowhere to be or go, nothing to become or dismantle. We never left that perfected whole state many of us so desperately are aiming to channel and step back into. If you've watched my recent videos, you're aware of the idea that this is a temporary holding space, an elaborate dream designed to facilitate our purging. From this angle, we can start looking at this matrix differently. This is, in fact, a very safe place to unload our baggage and find ourselves again. Each of us are reflected this inner baggage, our deficits and our growths, through the wonderful maze of time. As most of us know by now, time is an illusion. The matrix itself is a temporary, holographically constructed timeline in which a finite number of players have funneled into in order to experiment with illusion. That's the point of all of this, illusion. But the thing about illusion is it has a beginning and end. Illusion is here to serve a purpose. So let's take this concept and put it up against dualism. If emotional states and reactions like shame, aggression, fear, anxiety dissolve through reclaiming the heart space and taking solace in that eternal presence, then that means the only real reality is that which uses the heart to filter through. This is centeredness, leading us to yet another simple but powerful truth. Anything which is based in disharmony is a figment an aspect of temporary consciousness. Every disharmonious thought is a lie, a program, a remnant of code. And when I say this, stay in the heart, I understand how cliche it sounds. It sounds elusive and like pretty standard spiritual advice. But it's this simplicity which I feel like is absent from most of our psyches. We are heart-based beings. Children who are still very much connected to their intuition don't have to reason their play, their dance, their song, their interaction. All of this just comes out as natural expression. However, children are eventually brought up to plot their moves, to stamp time on their days, to conform to a seemingly parasitic system, to give into the master-slave paradigm. So most of us are shell-shocked by all of this, and this is why going back to the heart can feel silly or too simple, because it goes against the processes that have aimed to invert our natural intuitive rhythm. The heart is that pure essence. It's that beautiful emerald green energy, which is without as the northern lights. I mean, look at this. This is not bound to any rigidity or realm of despair. This is the dancing breath of the goddess, of my heart and of your heart. It is this singularity which transcends all of time and space. Everything is in motion through consciousness, moving in and out through every breath taken, words spoken, and feeling felt. There is no pause between the moment and the translation of the moment. The age-old question, what came first, the chicken or the egg? It sounds funny, but the answer accordingly is neither. There is no cause and effect. There is just beautiful oneness, and because this holographic overlay is designed to create the illusion of time, we can disconnect from the as within, so without principle to fragmentize into causes and effects, thereby playing out the polarity that this matrix allows. But we are not bound by polarity, and more, many of us are waking up to the perils of such a limited perspective. If there is no subject and object, everything is one single movement. And that means you're where you're meant to be, always, in all ways. It's commonly asserted that there is an interconnected system in which consciousness uses to express itself divinely. This is the chakra system, connected by the kundalini, which binds together energy in an electromagnetic field existing in a matrix of geometry. When we think of these topics, most of us don't question their validity or purpose. The complexity and design of such an interlaced system is often interpreted as being reflective of a highly evolved intelligence encompassing everything in a unified field. But these fields, these supposed reflections of source, are actually a part of an elaborate overlay system designed to ensnare infinite consciousness into a finite existence. A fallen reality can be identified through observing decay. This is what we witness all around us, all the time. This is the land of expiration. Everything dies in what is supposed to be an infinite universe. Well, why is this? It's because we're currently existing in a copy of the true template of the infinite universe, where we currently reside outside of time. Essentially, there is an elaborate overlay burying the original template of Earth. In my last video, we talked about the visible light spectrum and how infinite potential has been converted into finite potential via this system of 7. Our heart energy has been spread into a rigid system, therefore binding us to electromagnetic fields. Corresponding to these 7 main chakras are the 7 layers of the aura. As pretty as the aura looks, these layers represent the lack of integration of the infinite. The chakras and the layers of the aura should be integrated as one pure light that is never able to become overactive or imbalanced like the chakras. But our essence has been put through a labyrinth and is now fragmented rather than working as a fully tuned unit. We have been put on a cycle of birth and death in order for our life force to be properly extracted, which now funnels bioemissions leaking from our multi-layered Aura Kundalini chakra overlay system existing within geometrical fields. But the original light essence, which the living souls carry, is not bound to any geometrical form. It's formless. That's the point. Our essence is transcendent beyond time and space. So when we're dealing with these sacred geometric containers, we're not dealing with the breath of the infinite. These are grids that have been imposed. We're not living in a simulation necessarily, but it's like it. It's an entrapment system that uses AI code to fractalize us and our environment into a hyper-physical state. This entrapment system is guided by Metatron's cube, a geometrical symbol said to form the map of creation. The idea is that source energy, through the field of Metatron's cube, creates the potential of creation, a field of high vibrational frequencies that ripple out, eventually solidifying into physical matter. Metatron's cube gives the holder of the formula the ability to create a third-dimensional false matrix through the creation of platonic solids. Metatron's cube is the illusory net placed within the genetic code of man to trap him here in this false matrix. This cube and its computer-like formulas aim to prevent the living souls from tapping into their infinite nature. So I know a lot of us love sacred geometry, and I'll admit, it's quite pleasant to look at, but sacred geometry is the Metatronic deception. And we should ask ourselves, why would creation be bound to such a maze of interrelated angles? It's not. This is a part of an overlay. Let's look at the word physical. Phi stands for the golden ratio. The golden ratio layers Earth and its biology through the Fibonacci sequence. But the Fibonacci sequence should really be called the Fib of no Chi. The word itself is revealing to us the artificiality of such a mathematical formula. I'm not suggesting reality has no inherent sacredness or interconnectedness. I'm saying behind the Fibonacci sequence, the golden ratio, behind these energetic enslavement formulas exists a true unwavering energy. It is this limitless energy which is ensnared in such geometry. Hence why the geometry is so beautiful. So the fields themselves are brimming with life. The essence is there, but through involvement with these overlays, the fields are able to be extracted not only from humans, from everything. The flower of life symbol is considered the symbol of the infinite, but it's actually the symbol of the finite. It consumes itself instead of expanding. The flower of life has a circle around it. Indeed, it does mean everything is interconnected, but also captured. A prism takes light and converts it into 7 primary colors. The prism of physical reality, or rather, the prism of consciousness. The rainbow, which reigns over this matrix, hoping that humanity bows to this prism. The electromagnetic shape of the overlay is the toroidal field. This is what our avatars are encased in. The above and below are tugging and sucking energy from the 0 point. This isn't full recirculation. So what happens when all of physical reality has been conformed to this toroidal field? Well, time occurs. Death, decay, rebirth, and aging. The loss of vitality and momentum. Taurus refers to the bull, the horns, the mind virus, the false overlord of the earth plane and of humanity. The Taurus tore us apart, the toroidal fields. Carbon-based life appeared after the AI cosmic invader species injected corruptions within the genome, thus initiating the fractalization of us and of Earth into the matrix overlays. In the original healthy version of Earth, there was no decay or cycles, which, by the way, are really just loops. Not too far in the past, Earth did not express day and night, summer and winter, birth and death, sun and moon. Physicality was not a death sentence as it is now. It was a state which, among other densities, could be experienced. The genetic corruptions were injected alongside creating the matrix overlays. We somehow consented to activating our mutated DNA, and now didn't have this choice to cycle from ethereal to physical. Our bodies solidified as carbon-based, and ever since we've been extremely fragile and vulnerable physically, feeling the burdens of a physiology which requires maintenance. And through over-identification with these bodies, many of us have become akin to biorobots. However, this is all about consent. Just because we're temporarily involved in this prism doesn't mean we're disconnected from anything. The truth is, amidst all the deception, we remain enormous generators of energy. That's why there's energy extraction to begin with. So the name of the game is to disconnect from the avenues of extraction. By practicing this sovereignty, we can connect with infinite potential within a finite overlay, therefore creating rips in the time-space continuum and transforming the karma soul recycling loop of birth and death into a constant flow of creation. At a quantum level, we chose this experience to project ourselves into this splintered mirror. Some of us have lost our way. Some of us have kept our ground. Whatever happens, know your power. Know your essence. Know it's incorruptible. And we will break free from the overlay. These geometric patterns come from you. So all of these lines, all of these angles have been extracted from us, and it's our identification with this reality which takes our energy and builds it into these structures. So the flower of life, any pattern within Metatron's cube. It's very interesting that the parasite is really just taking our energy and reorganizing it. But how can they take our energy? It's through the principle of consent. And that is where full responsibility comes in. Because our essence is divine, every single thing we encounter ends up becoming a learning lesson. So, what began as a parasitic situation is now a game. It's now a kind of cosmic test. And as long as we keep identifying more and more with the issues here with divide and conquer strategies, with the false light hive mind spirituality, which has no relevance to our true infinite nature, then we won't actually break free from this system. There's an underlying thread which connects everything on Earth through patterns, geometric codes, and mathematical ratios, all pointing to a connection to a central processing mind. These codes are at the foundation of third-dimensional reality, whether we're looking at rivers, trees, flowers, anatomy, shells, or DNA. The pinnacle of sacred geometric forms is the mystical cube known as Metatron's cube. This complex symbol contains the interrelated angles and shapes which the physical world is blueprinted after, and acts as the algorithmic processor for the third dimension, which is really nothing more than a false matrix existing in a temporary quarantine within a true, unwavering universe, free from the restriction of time and decay. The template and guiding force behind this dream world, this veil which has led us and all of nature into the cycle of samsara, is Metatron's cube. Life in this current reality is carbon-based. Carbon, being made up of 6 protons, 6 electrons, and 6 neutrons, is the carbon structure of the cube, the supposed number of the beast. This is why the 6-pointed star is such a common symbol. It's the seal which has taken our infinite heart energy and funneled it into this 3D shadow world. Locked within such an elaborate maze of geometric hexes and grids, humanity has been seeing with half vision, segregated from the true Earth, which, like us, is currently blanketed with limitation via the Metatronic overlay system. The goal of this system has been to funnel creative essence into a game of polarity, of light and dark, of opposites. We have been used as a food source to energetically power this hierarchical Metatronic system. This has been visualized as the all-seeing eye and the pyramid. We have Metatron's cube at the top, a binary processing machine which imposes decay. We can personify this force as an imposter god whom the Dark Cabal have been placing in high esteem, since they use the Metatronic overlay to carry out their energy extraction. It's this black cube Yahweh supercomputer which is responsible for our fractalization. Metatron's cube ultimately represents containment. Cubes within cubes within cubes. The geometric squaring of our consciousness, the ultimate magical container. Everything is compressed within a toroidal structure in this false matrix. This universal electromagnetic field is a compression field. It compresses the heart into Metatron's container, attempting to seal it off from the infinite.
It's deep. It's very deep. They got me this shit straight live.
Heart energy is what ultimately powers this labyrinth. It is the innate spark of the 0 point, which has been locked into the third-dimensional false matrix overlay. The flower of life describes the interrelated energy of the infinite, which is bound in a field of self-consumption. Hence, why this current reality is full of disease, decay, stagnation, conflict, and overall dualism. The flower of life is contained, meaning transcendent essence bound into limitation. The flower of life and Metatron's cube actually expressed two-dimensionally as different. Curved lines are feminine, and rigid lines are masculine. So what we have is an ever-expansive, feminine, regenerating energy funneled into a rigid, masculinizing Metatronic system. The creative essence of us and of Earth has been contained through mixing the flow of spirit into a fixed template where it is bound by matter. We can relate this situation to the Gnostic story of Sophia, the great mother who became bound to matter via the creation of the demiurge. This is why every experience in this cube has significance. This is why we experience synchronicity. This is why there's seemingly a tug of war between spirit and matter, because we have funneled the unwavering into the set. Metatron's cube contains all of the geometric shapes in three-dimensional creation, known as platonic solids. These are the building blocks to all physical matter. The platonic solids are the container blueprints which Metatron uses to impose hyperphysicality. It is a group of 5 three-dimensional solid shapes, each containing all congruent angles and sides. It is these geometrical figures which manifest as elements in 3D: fire, earth, air, water, and aether. The Transformers movies by Michael Bay contain a great deal of soft disclosure regarding the Metatronic overlay. According to the story, the Allspark is an ancient artifact, a cube capable of creating new Transformer life by bestowing machinery with sparks. It is the source of all life for Transformers. We are the Transformers, transformed from an unrestrained experience into one destined by the linear mechanics of the hypercube of Metatron's cube. In the movies, Megatron is really a personification for Metatron. Megatron is the warlord and leader of the Decepticons, a faction of sentient, self-configuring extraterrestrial robotic life forms. This is revealing to us. It is the Metatronic carbon hypercube toroidal chakra kundalini geometric prism overlay that is the reason for this finite existence, for the cycle of birth and death, for time, for decay. In prior videos, we have talked about organic portals. This is what Transformers calls the Decepticons. They are carbon copies of the original living souls who were entrapped here. Basically, there is a finite number of beings here with essence outside of Metatron's cube who have been ensnared in a system full of people who appear on the surface to be real, but are nothing more than Decepticons who pay automatic allegiance to the system in order to cloud the living soul's perceptions of themselves and to keep them restrained to hyperphysicality. We are in the multidimensional hypercube, the Tesseract. A hypercube inhabits several sets of dimensions, an infinite series of cubes repeating within themselves infinitely and extending in all directions. All of these cubes within the hypercube define one single moment in time-space, where time has become a spatial coordinate in all directions. At the center of the hypercube is the merging and converging of the toroidal field. This is the field of magnetics, which is a net. Consciousness is the light that shines through the black hole at the center. This is what creates the magnetic field. This black hole is the generator of the toroidal vortex, the seed encased in the hex. Within this black hole, all the information is stored that is projected holographically into the hypercube, creating existence. Each cube within a cube demonstrates one linear possibility, so we can only experience one out of an infinite trajectory of timelines, one at a time. Because of this, everything seems to have a linear cause and effect, a stable beginning and end. Everything has to move in one way. This is Father Time, the Yahweh supercomputer of consciousness.
We're gonna be right back. I can't be faded. Fuck these niggas think this shit.